Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Let Us Head Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Was a Depressed Genius. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. You need to be realistic, kid. Izuku Midoriya stood on an empty rooftop excluding himself. He couldn't help himself as tears began falling uncontrollably. He fell to his knees, unable to hold in the sobs that racked his body. The dream-shattering words All Might had delivered to him replayed on an endless loop in his head. Midoriya had held on to hope of becoming a hero no matter his helplessness. He had hoped his idol would have been the only person to believe in him. Well, he was wrong. The #1 hero had ruthlessly ended any dreams he had of being a hero. Explosions sounded off in the distance, causing him to snap back to the moment. He looked over to the smoke with apathy. It's none of my business. I can't do anything anyway. With that thought, he began to make his way home, purposely avoiding the route Bakugo and his lackeys used. He made it home without any interruption. Midoriya himself had looked blank. He silently entered his home and made his way to his room soundlessly. Midoriya hadn't even noticed his arrival till his room door shut. He must be really tired, she muttered as she began preparing dinner. Up in Izuku's room, he stood in the middle looking around at the All Might merchandise that flooded his room. He no longer felt the wonder and happiness in his body when he looked at the room. Now he felt nothing but resentment. Without a word, he ripped open his closet and began carelessly tossing in everything All Might related into it. The shattering of figurines and lamps didn't affect him at all. In fact, as he kept breaking the things, it had a cathartic effect on him. Tears slid down his face as he finished throwing away the last of the All Might-themed room into the closet. A quiet calm settled over his room as he sobbed silently. Izuku, is everything L? Midoriya stopped mid-sentence as she poked her head into the room. Her face was one of shock as she saw the barren room. No sign of her son's hero whatsoever. She gingerly stepped into the room and moved over to her son. He sat on the floor, his body heaving as he cried in silence. Izuku, honey, what's the matter? She rubbed his back and waited for the boy to say something. Instead, his silent sobs turned into howls of anguish. Inko grabbed a hold of her son and hugged him until as he sobbed. She didn't let go until they stopped. Once they did, Midoriya had slipped into a sleep. 9 months later, Izuku let out a breath as he stared at the trash that littered Takoba Municipal Beach Park. He began digging through the trash for components. Ever since that fateful day, Midoriya had stopped his obsession with All Might and instead threw himself into inventing. He had found he had a knack for it, and it was one of the few things that brought him comfort. Midoriya had grown even more reserved. He lacked the energy to talk to others. He simply didn't care enough to talk to people unless it was about inventing or quirk analysis for his inventing. Izuku rummaged through old car parts looking for anything of use. This place had since become his gold mine for scavenging. I figured I'd find you here, Deku. Midoriya poked his head out of the old pickup and spotted his childhood leaning against the hood of the pickup. He wore shorts and a tank top. He was covered in sweat. Izuku figured that his jog must have just ended. Don't you get tired of digging through here? His face scrunched up in disgust as he looked over the garbage. Izuku ripped out radio and shoved it into his pack. He hopped out of the vehicle and shook his head to his only friend. Katsuki Bakugo was the only person who still talked to Izuku Midoriya. He was the only person aside from Midoriya who could have a regular conversation with the boy and get responses back. Bakugo had given up tormenting his former friend, and instead taken him back as a friend. Bakugo didn't like what became of Midoriya and still didn't know what caused it. All he knew was that he felt a need to protect the boy. Kaken, are you getting ready for the UE entrance exams? Izuku focused in on his only friend. The ashen blonde snorted and gave him a scowl. Of fucking course I am. I'm gonna be the #1 hero. You fucking dumbass, he shouted before taking a sip from his water bottle. Izuku nodded and then went about scavenging for more items. Bakugo let out a sigh and took out a sheet from his back pocket. Deku, you're going to UE too. Izuku whirled and stared at him with a raised eyebrow. The support course. You can get in and that way I can be the #1 hero and you can be the best inventor. He held out application form. Midoriya eyed it. Lame. He went back to looking for components. Bakugo grinded his teeth as he blew up his water bottle. He stopped over to Izuku and grabbed the boy by the collar. Izuku stared back blankly. You are going to apply. Wanna know why? Bakugo growled. It wasn't really a question. Midoriya knew this but still nodded to humor the boy. The support course students have full access to the UE on-campus workshop. If you do your coursework, you could spend all day in a workshop with top-tier gear. Bakugo smirked as he saw the sparkle enter Midoriya's eyes, a rare smile gracing his features. He snatched the form from Bakugo and immediately began filling it out. Izuku began thinking of all the possible inventions he could bring to life. I can make hover boots, or wait, I could make the fuelless jetpack. No. I could go forward with the gravity increasing cage, or the quirk nullification cuffs, or even Izuku rubbed his head where Bakugo had punched. You were muttering again. He laughed at the scowl that Izuku shot at him. It rivaled his own on most cases. Guess this means you're going to Yui with me. He smirked at his friend who simply nodded and went back to filling out the form. 1 month later, Izuku Midoriya stepped through the front gates of Yui with his only friend Katsuki Bakugo. Both boys shared a familiar scowl as they walked. Midoriya, however, had bags under his eyes. You didn't sleep at all. Bakugo growled at him. I did, 3 minutes before you decided to wake me up. He grumbled in return, causing the blonde boy to glare at him. So I repeat, you didn't fucking sleep. He shouted at the broccoli-haired boy. I did, but only for a short while. He shrugged nonchalantly. Bakugo would have shouted another thing at him until he began to tip over. Instead of faceplanting like Izuku hoped he would, the boy floated. What the fuck is going? A brown-haired girl righted him and placed her hands together. Sorry for stopping you, it's my quirk. I figured it'd be bad luck if you tripped just before the exams. She cheerfully explained to the blonde who stared at her with a semi-scowl. I don't need fucking luck. I'm gonna be the top of the exam no matter what. But thanks, round face, he grumbled while looking over at Midoriya, who had a notebook in hand and was furiously writing in it. Bakugo let out a sigh and began dragging him along. Come on, Deku. They left the girl as they entered the building. Round face, she muttered while poking her cheek. Bakugo and Midoriya stopped in front of a desk with a purple woman behind it. Hero entrance exams. She gave a pleasant smile. Yeah, for me. He's going for support course. Bakugo jerked a thumb at the boy who was still writing in a notebook. The woman nodded and pointed them in opposite directions. Deku, you better fucking pass. He grabbed the boy by the collar and growled at him. Izuku regarded him with a bored expression. As if I wouldn't pass. He rolled his eyes, earning a smirk from Bakugo. Good, see you later then. With that, they parted ways. Izuku took a seat at an empty station. The station was adjacent to a pink-haired girl muttering something about baby. Soon the room filled up with 100 applicants, followed by the exam giver, the pro hero Power Loader. Midoriya smiled as he saw the hero. Power Loader was a hero he looked up to due to his amazing inventions and designs. My name is Higari Majima, also known as the pro hero Power Loader. You may refer to me either as Majima or Power Loader. When I say begin, you will all have 3 hours to build a general support item. I will judge you based on the item. At the support course, inventions are graded on a pass-fail basis. Either you pass the exam or you fail. Good luck and begin. The workshop came alive with a whirlwind of activity. Midoriya rolled his neck, let out a yawn, put his head down and promptly fell asleep. Hatsume was working on her second baby. She had a hint of insanity in her eyes as she worked at the wrist-mountable jet. Majima-sensei had said they were to turn in 1 baby, but there wasn't a limit on how many babies she could make. May glanced to her left to see a sleeping head of broccoli. She shrugged and went back to making her baby. She wasn't sure if she wanted to turn this one in or hand make another. The Risk It or Risk Rocket. The name was a work in progress. Anyway, the device was a very diverse baby. One could use it to help direct flight or balance mid-flight. It could even be used as a strength enhancement, adding more force to every blow. The best part was that the fuel itself was sweat. The sweat was absorbed by the wrist mount and converted to vapor fuel. May smiled as she put down the Risk-It and began making a new baby. May was well into developing her third baby. This one would be a GPS of sorts. Instead of giving directions, this would instead count the number of people in the area with a sonic pulse. You're going to fry it. If you don't find a way to eject the excess heat from the pulse, might want to make it more of a cartridge-based system for the pulses. May stopped and examined her work. The voice was right. The compact design would have failed with the amount of heat output from the pulses. But who said that? May looked to her left to see Broccoli Head looking at her baby with a bored expression. He looked up at her with the same expression, then turned to his own station. He began muttering as he drew out plans on a portable whiteboard, which he pulled out of his bag. May shrugged and turned back to her baby and began improving it with the cartridge design. May looked up to see plenty of distressed faces furiously working away. Some soldering, others welding, and some connecting things. Must have been close to time up. She was right. As the clock ticked at its final 20 minutes, May decided to take a peek at Broccoli Head. By taking a peek, she meant looking right over his shoulder as he was hunched over. It's a multi-purpose grenade. Depending on the setting you put it to when you detonate it, a different effect will happen. The setting are shock, flame, water, slime. Broccoli explained without even glancing at May. She smiled wickedly at the baby. It was a really good one. Broccoli could prove useful. That's an amazing baby. Also, thanks for the heads up, Broccoli. If you hadn't helped, my baby probably would have blown up. She cheered in the boy's ear. His head tilted to the side as if contemplating something. No problem. With that, he grabbed his MPG and began walking towards Power Loader's desk. He stopped and tilted his head again. Izuku. Without another word, he left her presence. May noted Izuku's name. Wait, was that right? Oh well, time to show Sensei her first 2 babies. Midoriya had grown accustomed to the routine of the support course. Power Loader would give them lessons on different subjects. Midoriya would sleep through the lesson. At first his teacher had tried to keep him away but quickly gave up on the prospect. He settled for Izuku being able to sleep as long as his work was done. Izuku would sleep until his very first friend in Yui Hatsume would finish her work and then wake him to go make baby. It still brought a blush to their classmates every time she did it. Izuku had no idea why, as he was 100% positive that Mei had no inkling of intimacy in her. Izuku preferred it that way. It was part of the reason he and Mei worked together so well. Like now, for instance, Mei was pushed up against him trying to examine the wiring in the helmet he was currently wearing. The girl had no respect for personal space, and the current situation was proof of that. Izuku currently had a face full of cleavage, and the girl simply didn't care. He didn't feel any attraction towards the girl, which explained the lack of reaction he had to the situation. Broccoli, do you think the display in the visor is too intrusive? She stepped back and flicked a switch on the side of the speak helmet. Her crosshairs zoomed in on him, awaiting a response. Instantly, a series of screens popped up in front of Izuku. The sheer amount and lack of clear opacity definitely made for an intrusive display. Yeah, we should work on making the tabs more transparent. We also should double-check the wiring and make sure it will connect to the breather correctly. She nodded and began shutting the helmet down, once again invading his personal space. Not that he cared. Mei was one of the few people Izuku actually talked to. It was a rare anomaly. No one else could get past cold walls he had put up. Many of the students had tried and quickly given up once they realized they wouldn't make any progress. Izuku just simply offered them a wall, while with Mei he was actually somewhat normal with. As normal as the two gearheads could be. Power Loader had considered sending the boy to a counselor to have him checked but decided against it. The main reason why was one, Hatsume. No matter how cold the boy could be, she never experienced that. She was the only student in his class that could easily bypass his walls. Power Loader suspected that was in part due to her overwhelming love for inventing a trait in which both students shared. Izuku and Mei continued to work on their underwater reconnaissance helmet, or as Hatsume called it, the thought bubble. The pair continued to work on it, not noticing the workshop clear out for lunch. They continued to work in a comfortable silence until the large metal doors slammed open, revealing a very furious blonde. Deku, get over here, you aren't skipping lunch again. Midoriya looked at his watch and realized that they had been working through their lunch break. Again, with a sigh, he grabbed Mei by the collar and dragged her out of the room with him. Bakugo continued to yell at him for continuously skipping lunch, while Izuku and Mei looked over their plans for the thought bubble. Where'd Bakugo run off to? Looked like he was ready to kill someone. Kirishima Ijiro questioned. The spiky redhead looked around the table. He sat with Ashido Mina, Hagakure Toru, Yaoyorozu Momo, Todoroki Shoto, Asui Tsuyu, Jiro Kyoka, and Kaminari Denki. They all shook their heads. When doesn't he look that pissed off though? The acid quirk wielder asked with her head cocked to the side, making sure her horns didn't hit the creation quirk user. A few muttered in agreement. Maybe he decided to actually go and find a way to fix his crappy personality. Jiro joked as she wrapped a jack around her index finger, a bored expression on her face as she was already done eating. As if talking about him was a summoning ritual, the explosive-tempered teen came bursting through the doors. To their surprise, he dragged along a struggling student who seemed to be desperately trying to escape. Their verbal exchange could be heard as they got close. "I don't give a damn, Deku," their classmate shouted while quite literally dragging the green-haired boy by his feet. "It's not fair. Mei is already back at the workshop making adjustments to our invention." The boy whined while desperately clawing at the floor. It was clear he wasn't getting away, as the other boy held onto him with a vice-like grip. The pair reached the table and the green-haired boy lapsed into silence as he was forcibly sat between Kirishima and Jiro, his face set in a scowl rivaling Bakugo's. They all stared with a mixture of curiosity and worry. They didn't know exactly what to make of this. All eyes drifted to Bakugo, who kept a grip on the pale teen. "You aren't leaving till you eat all of your lunch. If you even try it, I will go and blow your damn inventions to high hell." He growled at the boy, who went rigid in response. "That's better. Now stay here while I get you food." He stomped off without waiting for a response. An awkward silence loomed over the WANA students as they looked over the captive boy. He was currently in a grease-stained gym uniform. No one dared speak until finally Kirishima broke the spell. "Sup man, I'm Kirishima Ijiro." The other boy didn't so much as look his way. Instead, his scowl only deepened and he put his head down into his folded arms. The table was taken aback by the rudeness. "Hey, that was really freaking rude. He was trying to be nice." Mina snarled at the boy. "Watch your goddamn mouth. Besides, he ain't gonna talk back." Everyone froze as Bakugo returned with a tray of food that was overstacked. He placed it in front of the other teen, who begrudgingly dug in. Bakugo looked at the boy with an uncharacteristic gentleness. It melted away as he looked at all the curious students. His name is Izuku Midoriya. He isn't gonna talk to you unless it's about your quirk or an invention. So don't try to make small talk with him cause it doesn't work. And don't you dare bother him either. He added the last part with a low growl. Everyone's eyes widened as they realized that the iron-barbed Bakugo was actually looking after another student. He was actually being sorta nice to the boy, unlike how he treated most of his class. Deku, that crazy chick you're always with, are you two together or just doing it? The group felt light blushes at his bluntness only to feel even more dumbfounded at what happened next. Izuku stopped eating and let out a snort. Yeah, right. Speaking of which, you still whining to your mom about treating you like a baby. Bakugo glared at the boy who unflinchingly stared back. No one could believe it. Someone had just insulted the most short-tempered person in class, and not only did he survive, they were both smirking at each other. The students just sat in stunned silence as the two began slinging insults back and forth. Before they could even regain their composure, Midoriya had finished eating and was already up and out the door. The students looked between themselves until finally Kaminari spoke up. Who was that? And what kind of quirk does he have to keep you from killing him? He questioned while excitedly leaning forward. Bakugo scowled at the human battery. I already fucking told you his name. Besides, he doesn't have a super quirk. He doesn't have one at all. The excitement in Kaminari instantly died as he heard his classmate. Deku doesn't have a quirk and he doesn't need your pity either, so wipe that fucking sorry-ass look from your face. None of you know shit about him, so keep his name out your mouths. He shot them all one last intense glare before he stormed off. The table erupted into excited talk of the unusual duo. Do you think they are going out? The invisible girl swayed side to side as images of the two flashed through her head. Kaminari rolled his eyes in response. Definitely not Hagakure. However, it was quite strange seeing a side of Bakugo that actually cared for someone else. Yaoyorozu chimed in with a hand on her chin, her mind replaying the way the duo had interacted. Everyone nodded at the statement. Told you guys he wasn't heartless. He just has a really rough exterior, one you gotta break through with persistence. Kirishima slammed his knuckles together as he grinned. You guys are missing something important here, Ribbit. The frog girl finally spoke up, drawing everyone's attention. Bakugo introduced him as Izuku Midoriya. She waited for them to catch on. When no one did, she continued. He used his name. Bakugo never addresses anyone by their name. Realization dawned on them as they saw the tiny detail. Bakugo had actually used Izuku's name. He never did that for any of them. It was always some insult to be used as a label. I think we should look more into this, Izuku Midoriya. Ashido chimed in with a mischievous grin on her face. She strummed her fingers across the table. When no one objected her idea, she pumped a fist in the air. Then Operation Find Out More About Bakugo's Secret Boyfriend is a go. Everyone felt a blush creep into their face, even the silent Todoroki, who had kept silent and to himself. The conversation continued, however Kyoka Gyro stopped listening. Jiru felt uncomfortable talking about the quirkless Izuku. Of course, she wanted to know more about the person who was able to insult the explosive-tempered kid. Another part of her felt saddened. When she had looked at the boy before Bakugo had shown up, she saw something. What Gyro saw was a very isolated teen. Bakugo had only reinforced her thought when he confirmed the boy to only have two friends. A tap on her shoulder brought her out of her stupor. Her eyes widened as she noticed everyone getting up to leave. She ran up to the living battery and began joking with him. The thoughts of Izuku Midoriya forgotten for the time being. The rest of the day had passed uneventfully. Izuku waved a small goodbye to Mei as he left to meet up with his fiery-tempered caretaker. They had agreed to meet up at the train station, and he really didn't feel like giving Bakugo any real reason to be angry. As he walked to the train station, he decided to flip through his hero analysis notebook. Deku. Izuku didn't bother to look up as he approached his friend. They began walking together towards the train station in a peaceful silence. Bakugo was the first to break the silence. Like always. Seems like you're enjoying Yui. You even made a friend. Even if she is insane and weird as hell. Izuku didn't miss the small smile that crossed his friend's face. Guess you could say so. But it's more or less I like having access to the workshop. Nothing else really interests me. His voice carried the usual monotone to it. Bakugo rolled his eyes as they turned onto another street. Unknown to the both of them, they had a third party listening in on their conversation. At this point, I'd have to say you're the most arrogant person I know, Bakugo said with all seriousness. Izuku stopped walking and looked at his friend as if he had grown another head. This coming from the guy who says he's the best out of everyone because of his sweat. Bakugo whirled on the boy and grabbed him by the collar. That's cause it's true. I'm gonna be the #1 hero and become a true hero. Even better than that bastard All Might. Izuku saw nothing but determination in his eyes and let out a small laugh. Yeah, well, looks like I have to become the best inventor out there. Damn right. The pair lapsed into a comfortable silence as they continued their walk to the train station, without ever noticing the person following closely and listening intently. Midoriya sat across from his mother as they ate dinner. Inko stared at her son and felt the all-too-familiar stab of guilt. She so desperately wished for the cheerful and happy Izuku that she had known. She couldn't help but feel like she had let him down. Inko never did find out what caused this change in her son. Ever since the day he came home and threw away his hero things, nothing had ever been the same in the Midoriya household. Izuku, sweetie. The dull green orbs looked up at her in acknowledgement. Another stab of guilt. I just wanted to say that. I am so proud of what you're doing. She meant it too. When she had found out that her son was going to UE, she had nearly fainted. To hear that he was being recognized for his inventing skills had brought her extreme happiness. It also brought the shallow hope that this would be the thing that got her son back. Thanks, it really does mean a lot that you are proud of me. I'm gonna make sure everyone knows my name cause of my inventions. A smile had crossed his face and a surge of emotion flooded Inko seeing that wonderful smile again. I'm gonna head to my room, have some designs I wanna work on. Kaken will probably be here in the morning to wake me up, so don't be surprised if explosions happen. With a kiss to her forehead, he left the room. Izuku sat in the dark. He didn't bother turning on the lights when he entered his room. The day had been taxing on him, leaving him drained. His mind began wandering back to the cursed day. Anger flooded his system as he dug his fingers into his arms. That day had cemented the stain that was Izuku Midoriya in his head. He was weak, quirkless, and stupid. Being a hero. Of course it was impossible for someone like him. Izuku Midoriya could never be a hero. He couldn't be a hero, and that was all there was to it. The swirling void of self-hate began spreading through him like sludge. It clung to him and began smothering him. It was driving him insane. Izuku shot out of his bed and turned the lights on. He dropped into his seat and began working on designs for a new invention. His mind becoming laser-focused on his work, forgetting about himself and the powerlessness he couldn't escape unless he was working on something. Looks like no sleep again tonight, Midoriya mumbled as he put on his hairband. The teacher of Class 1 walked into the support workshop. Aizawa didn't plan on coming in here first thing in the morning, but an urgent message from Power Loader had forced him. He stopped next to the pro hero's desk. Power Loader looked up at the underground hero. Racerhead, thank you for coming by so suddenly. Aizawa merely nodded and waited for him to continue. Power Loader pressed on unfazed. I have a request. At this, Aizawa raised an eyebrow. It was rare for the head of the support course to ask for something. I have an excellent student. He is by far one of the brightest minds I've had in my class, but he brings up a unique problem. He slid a folder to Aizawa as he said the last part. Aizawa began to look through it and saw a picture of a very bored-looking green-haired student. He flipped through the papers to see that the boy had already made a wide array of support devices, all of which had been given a pass by Power Loader. All of the kids' grades were A's. He saw no problem here. What's the problem with him? Aizawa asked as he couldn't find any cause for a problem. Izuku Midoriya seemed like a model student. Power Loader let out a sigh before continuing. Well, for one, the boy is extremely antisocial. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but even with me he refuses to hold a conversation with. Every lesson I've tried to teach he has slept through, but come time to work or take a test he has no issue breezing by it. I've noted only 2 students that are able to interact with the boy, one of them being from your class, one Bakugo Katsuki. Aizawa was unable to hide his shock at the mention of his #1 headache in class. Are you sure the boy is interacting of his own free will? The other teacher only laughed at his query. Not always, but Bakugo has good intentions. If anything, I'd say they act as brothers. But that's not the problem. The problem is Izuku is already far more advanced than his class. However, he doesn't work on his social skills and has no drive to learn any tricks from his fellow students save one. Which is why I wanted to ask you if you would be able to take him for half of the day. While being in your care, he would have to assist you with tasks you deem necessary. He will have to develop socially while also being able to assess a student's fighting style and quirk. His grade will depend on this, as it is crucial for a support course student to learn marketing as well as adapting to different kinds of quirks. Power Loader went quiet and waited for a response. Aizawa could tell there was more to this than just developing the kid as a support course student. If anything, this kid was already a gold mine for support companies. No, Power Loader definitely had an ulterior motive in this. Aizawa out the folder back onto the desk and did something that always sent chills down others' spine. He smiled. All right, I'll do it. Izuku stood just outside the giant door of Class 1A. He couldn't help but feel a sharp annoyance at this new assignment. Not only would he have to interact with people as part of his grade, but he would be reminded of his condition every single moment he spent doing it. He let out a sigh as he heard the cue for him to come in. As he stepped into the silent room, he could feel every pair of eyes locked onto him, tracking his every moment, analyzing his every feature for any distinguishing things. Without realizing it, he had made himself scowl. The pro hero Eraserhead stared at him with a hidden curiosity. Okay everyone, this here is Midoriya Izuku. He's in the support course. As a part of his classwork, he will be joining your class for half the day. then report back to his teacher. He knows what his assignment is and he will do it accordingly, so don't worry if he isn't working on anything in class. A mischievous grin had ghosted its way across his face as he paused. First, why don't you introduce yourself to the class? Give them some facts about yourself. Izuku went rigid as he heard the added part of his introduction. He could feel his nails digging into his palms as he stared at the sea of faces staring at him until finally he saw the shocked ashen blonde. The class waited for what seemed like ages for the boy to say something until he finally let out a breath. Any facts or questions about me could be directed to Kaken, he droned out in his usual bored tone. Without waiting another second, he walked over and dragged a seat over to Bakugo's desk and promptly slumped into it. The whole class was taken aback at his complete lack of care. Tenya Ida shoot up and began giving the boy a lecture on discipline and respect, while the rest of the class waited for the pending explosion from the hothead. Bakugo looked between the two and finally stood up. Classes, shut your mouth and sit down. Ida went silent in shock. Bakugo wasted no time and turned to the apathetic boy and grabbed his collar. Deku, his voice had a dangerous edge to it. The boy still seemed unfazed. Why didn't you tell me you were gonna have class with me? He shouted as he shook the boy. In response, the boy smirked. Oops. The blonde seemed ready to kill the boy but instead sat him back down and sat down himself and looked at Aizawa, who had a smirk on his face. Now that you all are finished, we have class to start. Aizawa wrote out a page number on the board and then climbed into his sleeping bag and went to sleep. Not before slipping some earplugs, Izuku noticed. After a few minutes he felt all eyes on him again. He scowled and turned to Bakugo, who was already glaring at him. What the hell did you do to get kicked out of the workshop? He growled out. Izuku simply shrugged. I didn't socialize enough and now I need to work on my social skills. He grumbled back. As if on cue, someone walked up to the pair. Hey there, the name's Kaminari. You ate lunch with us the other day. Midoriya didn't so much as shift in his direction. Instead, he became silent and put his head down in Bakugo's desk. Hey, dude, I was just Mac. Thought I told you already that he wasn't going to talk back. A chill went through the room as everyone looked at the dark look on Bakugo's face. Kaminari backed away and retreated to his desk. Everyone, seeing the warning, wisely went about doing their work. Half an hour had passed when Izuku picked his head back up from his nap. While the Wana students focused on their work, he decided to analyze then again. His eyes roamed until they landed on a head of brown hair, round face. He uttered. Without another word, he dragged his chair next to hers and took out his notebook. The girl looked up in shock and confusion. Most of the class was once again focused on the odd and silent student. Can I help? She didn't get to finish her statement as Izuku showed her an incomplete page in a notebook. The title of the page was labeled as Round Face. I didn't get to complete my analysis on your quirk. I have plenty of questions and we don't have time to waste. The girl looked shocked as she reviewed the page. You got that much from just a glance? He nodded. You also remembered me. I remember every entry. Could we proceed to the part where I question you? His bored tone had picked up a slightly annoyed tinge to it. One Uraraka did not miss. She crossed her arms and smirked. No, her smirk only grew wider when she saw the visible annoyance wash over his face. You have to get to know me, and once I feel like we have a good enough relationship, then you can have all the information you want. The only sound in the room was the howl of laughter from Bakugo. Izuku was going insane. There was no way that he would be able to go through with Round Face's request, but her couldn't just leave his page half finished. Sure, he could just watch her, but that would just be speculation at best. He sighed as he made his way through the halls. The rest of the classes had gone by uneventfully. He was now making his way back to the support course when he rounded the corner and slammed into someone, causing him to fall. The swirling void began eating away at him rapidly as he stared up at the number one hero. Izuku felt his throat shut. It felt as if the sludge was clogging up his bloodstream. At some point, Midoriya had begun to shake. He couldn't control it. Are you all right? Recognition began to creep into his face as he stared down at Izuku. Unable to take any more, Izuku scrambled up and pushed past the hero and ran the rest of the way to the support course. Unable to stop his shaking, he sat down at his seat in the workshop. As if sensing his distress, May pulled out a tarp and placed it over him and went back to work without prying. Izuku was thankful for the action, because as soon as he was covered, the floodgates opened up and he silently wept. Izuku Midoriya could keep his walls up, but thankfully his friend had put a cover for him, be able to let them crumble for now. Deku. Bakugo pushed the door open to the dark room. Without waiting for a response that was never coming, he stepped in. After some fumbling and quiet cursing, he made it to his best friend's bed. He felt a mixture of anger and sorrow when he saw the blank stare Izuku was giving the wall. Silently, he sat on the bed across from him and waited. Bakugo had learned early on that it was better to let his friend recover from his catatonic state in his own. Already prepared for what he was going to find, he had packed his bag for an overnight stay. He let out a yawn as he pulled out his phone and began surfing the web. Earlier in the day, Bakugo felt a rising irritation at the poorly hidden glances his class had been giving him. He knew that they wanted to know more about Deku, but they wouldn't get anything from him, and they sure as hell wouldn't think of bothering him if they knew what was good for them. The ringing of the final bell roused him from his thoughts. All the students began packing up and letting out sighs of relief. Bakugo was the first one up and was already headed for the door when it opened before he could do it himself. Blast him explode. Great, come with me. Before he could react, he was grabbed and being dragged through the halls. He stared daggers at the crazy pink-haired girl that hung with Deku. He yanked his arm free of her grasp and stopped walking. What the hell is it, you crazy bit? The worried look she shot him set off warning alarms in his head. There was only one thing she would come to him about. One person. Where is he? He growled at the girl. Unfazed by the action, she began leading him again. The run wasn't very long. They entered empty classroom and Bakugo instantly saw a motionless Deku. He rushed over and began to examine his best friend. It was clear that he had been crying, and now he had shut down completely. He let out a sigh. Is he okay? Bakugo glanced back at the grease-stained Mei and let out another sigh. Deku is? Well, he's not fine, but he's not in any danger. He's just trying to cope with something that overloaded him. It had been so long since Izuku had gone into this state. It had been even longer that he had panic attack he couldn't deal with. Bakugo felt red-hot anger rush through him. He felt like destroying something, anything really. He so desperately wanted to know what had caused his friend to become like this, because once he found out he would demolish it or them. What should we do? The girl had gotten next to them now and was looking at Izuku with a still worried expression. Bakugo closed his eyes and calmed down. His anger wouldn't be of any use here. You don't have to do anything. He's my responsibility. Plus already have a plan for times like this. Not wanting to wait any longer, he pulled out his phone and dialed a contact labeled as Deku emergency. The phone rang twice before the receiver picked up. Hello Katsuki. Will you be joining us for dinner tonight? A cheerful Izuku Midoriya picked. He took a long breath before pressing the Deku button. Mrs. Midoriya, Izuku had an attack. He's currently shut down in his classroom. He cringed at the unintelligible screeching he heard. I'm coming right now. Not long after had Deku's mom had come and picked them up and taken them home. Present time. Bakugo looked up from his phone when he felt movement from the bed. He checked the time, 2:30 a.m. Deku had been like that for most of the afternoon into the night. Thankfully, it wasn't the longest by far. Kaken, why are you here? The raspy voice brought a smirk to him. Cause your room's a cluttered fucking mess and you would kill me if I sat in your work seat. He rolled his eyes as he added the last part. Deku slowly got out of the bed and went to flip the light switch. The blinding light stung both of the boys' eyes. The light source illuminated all of the scattered components and junk that littered the room. Deku slumped into his work seat and pulled the covers he wore as a full-body wrap closer. His dull eyes looked over his room. It's not a cluttered mess. I clearly have two separate paths that you choose to ignore. The defensive tone in his voice sent a rush of relief through Bakugo. He couldn't help as a smile wormed its way onto his face. Bullshit. Only you could possibly see this as clean. Izuku simply shot him a glare in response. Bakugo chuckled and dug into his bag. He threw a notebook to the boy who struggled to catch it while wrapped in the blanket. Anyway, Mei wants you to get your share of work done on ... What was it again? Cyclops, name final, according to her. Izuku finished for his friend. A fanatical look over him as he began flipping through the book. He placed the book on the table and began drawing a design on his whiteboard. Well, while you get to work, I'll go reheat the dinner your mom made for us. Bakugo fumbled his way to the door. As he opened up, Izuku spoke up. Kaken, I know you want to ask about today. I know you want to learn the reason. But thanks for not trying to force it. It's something I'm not ready to talk about. I know, Deku. Just make sure you come to me when you are ready. With that, Bakugo left to go get them food. Midoriya let out a yawn as he stood in front of Power Loader's desk. The teacher finished shuffling some paperwork before grabbing a pink slip and handing it to Izuku. You'll be going with Class 1 to USJ 2 days from now. That slip needs a parent's signature. It also doubles as a requisitions form. Put down a small, and I do mean small, list of items you have developed or co-developed with Mei. Should you need to participate in any of the events, they should be able to help you. Any questions? Izuku shook his head as he turned and trudged back to his workspace. He felt angered by this turn of events. Not only would he have to work with the heroes of tomorrow, he would have to compare himself to normal people. Worst of all, he could possibly run into him again. The void began shifting uncomfortably. Broccoli, look. He turned to see Mei smiling triumphantly as she presented Cyclops. Turns out the name was final. Izuku instantly became focused on the drone, the void being completely forgotten. I'm kinda surprised that we got it done without a mishap, he commented as he took it in his hands. Mei gave him a smile that was all teeth. Well, that's thanks to your ingenious cooling system. Thanks to that, there's no need to sorry about overheating. He shook his head. There was no way it was his credit. They wouldn't have been able to build the drone if it weren't for Mei's previous ideas. I'm heading to USJ soon. Mind if I give it a field test? Mei flew out of her seat faster than he could process and had him by the collar. Of course not. This is the perfect opportunity to see if Cyclops is ready to be graded. Both gearheads went on about more additions to the small drone. A small cough broke them from their trance. While you really can talk. Izuku turned to face a problem that he had to take care of sooner rather than later. Round face. The girl looked hurt at the name. I told you it's Uraraka. She grumbled while pouting. They had lost interest and gone back to tuning their baby. Izuku lost all emotion and hid behind his walls. He silently stared at her and waited. Finally the girl sighed and continued. Anyway, Mr. Aizawa sent me to get you. Something about meeting. Also, at this rate you'll never be my friend and you'll never get the facts about my quirk. She chuckled at the scowl that crossed the boy's face. She enjoyed when the boy actually showed a reaction other than apathy. Izuku motioned for her to lead the way, to which she happily did. They had been walking for a couple minutes and Izuku already wanted to rip his hair out. Why couldn't this girl just tell him what he wanted? Why did she have to force him into this situation? The fact that he couldn't finish a page in his analysis book had been nagging him constantly. Even if he had given up on being a hero, taking fine-tuned notes on quirks was key to bettering his inventions. Yet here he was with half a page of speculation and ideas for inventions that couldn't be acted on. He shot one last glare at the back of the girl's head before steeling himself. So, I give you information on me, it would only be fair if you gave it back. He waited as the girl continued walking. Finally he could hear muffled laughter. I'm sorry, but is that really how you make friends? The laughter went full-blown and Izuku wanted to just walk away. I'm not laughing at you. It's just that you're really bad at this, but hey, at least you're trying. But let's see, instead of forcing it like this, how about you eat lunch at my table and we'll take it from there. They stopped in front of the doors of the teacher's lounge. Well, until then, she waved goodbye. Izuku just glared back until she was out of sight. Finally, after getting his bearings, he entered the room. What was waiting for him was not Aizawa. Ah, it's so nice to meet a new student. And from what I hear, you have quite the mind. Midoriya looked around until finally he looked down. Yes, down here. Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Midoriya. I am your principal. Midoriya sat across from the sentient animal, feeling a new layer of sludge. He couldn't help but think that the universe was laughing at him. An animal got a quirk, but he got nothing. He was convinced that he was the punchline of an ongoing joke at this point. So, Mr. Midoriya, do you have any idea why I asked you to come here? The principal poured 2 cups of tea while throwing the question out there. Unable to come up with an answer, he simply shook his head. Oh well, there is nothing to be worried. I simply asked for you to have a meeting. You see, I wanted to meet the boy who has been put on a modified curriculum. He handed a cup to Midoriya while taking a sip from his own. Midoriya mimicked him, not wanting to talk. I must say the reports were accurate in your refusal to talk. But worry not, I'm not here to force you to talk. However, I would like to get to know you more. So would you be opposed to these meetings every Friday? Midoriya scanned the dog. No mink, no dog, rodent. Izuku settled for rodent as he looked at his principal. He saw no hidden threats or underlying intentions. He nodded in agreement. Wonderful. With that settled, I'll let you get back to your class. Izuku finished his scalding drink and silently exited the room. The door to the closet opened once the coast was clear. That boy showed a lot more emotion when I first met him. Toshinori Yagi stepped out in an oversized suit and fell onto the seat the boy had previously occupied. Nezu simply hummed patiently. I wonder what could have happened to him. Toshinori gave his boss a quizzical look as the principal let out a chuckle. Don't mind me, just laughing at a situation. He dismissed the look and took on a serious one himself. On to pressing matters. Have you found a successor? Izuku double-checked his briefcase and backpack for the 100th time, causing his friend to let out a groan. Everything is still there just like it was 5 minutes ago. He only received a blank stare in response, causing him to roll his eyes. They sat on the bus headed to the unexpected simulation joint. All of Class 1 was abuzz as they talked about the things they were going to do today. All except for 2 very tired-looking students with attitude problems. Hey dude, why do you look so exhausted? Kirishima exclaimed as he looked at Bakugo. Instead of receiving a death glare, a certain green-haired boy got it. Cause some dumbass wanted to invent instead of sleep. He growled at his best friend. Without a second to react, the quiet boy was glaring back just as fiercely. Smarter than you, and you didn't have to stay up. A smirk had crept its way onto his face, while a deeper scowl had crawled into Bakugo's. Before the pair could begin their insult slugfest, the bus came to a stop. Welcome to Unexpected Simulation Joint, or USJ for short, the Space Hero 13 announced before going into a speech. Everyone was immersed as they listened in awe. Izuku looked around at the structures in awe, the technical side of him running wild with questions and a curiosity for the method to control the place. His trance was broken when he spotted a dark purplish mist spring up. Fear struck him to the core as a severed hand came out of the mist, followed by soul-piercing eyes. After the first out came more and more villains. Izuku whimpered, "Everyone get back." Without hesitation, Aizawa slipped on his goggles and began running towards the growing group of villains. Come students, we must get out of here. 13 began ushering them towards the door while Eraserhead began dealing with the group below. A firm vice-like grip clamped onto his own hand. "Come on, Deku." Izuku saw the hidden worry that his friend had for him as they began following the others. The group didn't get far before the mist appeared in front of them. This time Izuku could see yellow slits that he assumed were eyes. "Greetings, we are the League of Villains. Forgive our audacity, but today we've come here to UA High School, this bastion of heroism, to end the life of All Might, the symbol of peace. However, he doesn't seem to be here. No matter, I still have a job to do." Die. An explosion ripped the mist apart as Bakugo rushed forward to attack alongside Kirishima. That was very unhero-like. The mist reappeared and consumed most of the class. Dark flooded Izuku's vision and a sense of nausea overcame him as he fell onto dirt. Before he could react, Midoriya was hoisted to his feet. A punk rock girl helped him up and held a sword at the ready. All around them villains stood ready to pounce. "Stay between us," she whispered to him. "Jiru, we must protect Midoriya." Yaoyorozu ordered the other girl, who grumbled in response. The villains, not wanting to wait, began to charge. The girls began to fend off the attackers while Midoriya stood rooted in place. The swirling void of hate and doubt was raging uncontrollably. Izuku couldn't do anything in this situation. Nothing. He was quirkless, of course he couldn't fend for himself. All these guys had quirks and were trying to kill them. "We can't keep this up," Jiru shouted as she blasted away some attackers with her boots. "You're slowing them down. If they die, you'll be the cause of it. All because of your condition. You're useless, quirkless, you have nothing useful to bring." Izuku clutched his ears, trying to block out the thoughts as the void began eating away at his very being. There was nothing he could do except get them killed. Jiru was knocked down as a villain began to bring down a large boulder ready to crush the girl. In that moment, Izuku saw past his haze and fog of hate. He saw someone looking at him desperately for help. The void froze, his blood seemed to freeze. The sludge seemed to disappear. A blazing fury erupted within him, overtaking the void. If they died here, it wouldn't be his fault, it would be his fault. It would all rest of All Might's hands for not being here to save the day. Jiru stared her death in the face as it came barreling down on her, when suddenly an explosion sent the attacker flying. Jiru looked at the spot where the villain had stood. Her eyes traveled over to where the blast had come from. What stood there was the cold and distant boy, but this time something seemed different about him. His gaze seemed more piercing and mechanical. The boy looked at her, no through her, and uttered a phrase that sent chills down her spine, for the lack of emotion, almost as if he wasn't fully aware of what was going on. "Fear not, for I am here." "Deku," Bakugo screeched as he looked around. His mind was going a mile a minute. He wouldn't be able to ever forgive himself if something happened to Midori. He blasted through villains without remorse, not stopping even for Kirishima, who began following the frenzied team. A ground-shaking explosion caught his attention. Without waiting, he raced off into the direction. "Bakugo, wait. You gotta slow down, man," the spiky redhead called out as Bakugo began soaring forward. He got no response from the boy. More explosions rocked the facility. Bakugo could see the mountainous region they were coming from. Jiru and Yaoyorozu retreated to the base of the mountain just as Bakugo and Kirishima got there. "What's going on?" Kirishima exclaimed over the explosions. The girls shot them a worried look before saying anything. "Something happened with Midoriya. He went berserk. He told us to get out of the area, then began setting off bombs," Jiru shouted. Bakugo began flying up the mountain, not waiting for any more. What awaited him at the top was a scene of destruction. At the epicenter was Midoriya. All around him villains were strewn about. Bakugo landed next to the boy. "Deku." The boy whirled about, a crazed look on his face. When the boy saw who was in front of him, they lost their edge and crazed look. Instead, tears began to pool, and the boy fell to his knees, dropping the grenades that he had been holding. "Kakin," Izuku managed to mutter before passing out. Bakugo caught his friend and began carrying him to safety. Just as the UE staff arrived to the facility, Izuku opened his eyes to a blindingly white room. His head stung as he tried to remember what happened. He remembered the villains attacking, then the last thing he remembered was seeing someone in danger, then he blacked out. The door slid open as Jiru Kyoka stepped in with a surprised look on her face. "The doctors said you were sleeping." Izuku kept a placid look on his face, not feeling up to talking. Jiru, not being easily deterred, took the seat next to his bed. "I just came to say something. I won't be long." She began playing with her earphone jack, not sure how to continue. Finally, after a minute, she stood up and let out a sigh. "I guess I wanted to say thank you for saving me. You were a real hero. Anyway, see ya." She stormed out of the room before the boy could see the embarrassment on her face. What Jiru didn't see was the shocked look on Izuku's face. He sat there stunned, replaying what she had just told. Izuku didn't know when he had started crying, but all he could think about was the overwhelmingly warm feeling burning in his chest. A real hero. Katsuki has come into the room and forced Midoriya to get more sleep after giving him a long and loud chewing out on his recklessness and stupidity. It wasn't long before both their mothers had arrived and entered the room. He had gotten his own speech from his mother while Inko profusely thanked him for bringing her baby back safely. Bakugo simply sat through most of it quietly, lost in his thoughts, his mind going back to the day his friend had become his friend again. Back then he had that crazed look in his eyes just like at USJ. The past. Hey Deku. Bakugo had grabbed onto the boy's shoulder while letting off a small explosion, expecting the usual fear. He never saw the fist coming and definitely didn't think his nose would break. Before his mind could register what was happening, he had been tackled to the ground. Finally realizing what was going on, he shot an explosion up at the boy. But that didn't stop the green-haired boy as he continued to rain punches down on him. Another explosion knocked him off and gave Bakugo enough time to recover and begin his assault. He unleashed explosion after explosion until the other didn't stand back up. "The fuck is wrong with you, quirkless bastard? Do you wanna die?" He growled in the battered boy's face as he grabbed his collar. What happened next shattered a constant in his world. Yes, 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 I wanna die. The usual happy and unbreakable boy cried out while tears poured out of his eyes. No longer was this the annoying, hopeful boy that Bakugo grew to hate. Though this wasn't anyone he knew. Present. "Come on Katsuki, we have to head home," Mitsuki called out as she left the room. Bakugo stood up and began to follow before looking at his sleeping friend. "I promise that I'll make you happy again." Izuku was sitting up in his hospital bed. The staff had told him that he would be allowed to be discharged soon. Just one more thing. A psychiatric evaluation. Izuku couldn't help but feel annoyance at the upcoming test. He didn't fear the questions that he would have to answer, he couldn't care less about them. This was just another small annoyance before he was allowed back home, where he would be allowed to invent. Did he want to invent? Izuku scowled as the thought slithered into his head. Of course he still wanted to invent, but was he really content with just staying a support course student? He had been told by a hero course student that he had been a hero and that meant the world to him. Maybe he could be more than. No, this thought process was stupid. He knew the answer clear as day. All Might even said so himself. Izuku had long since given up his dreams and naivety. He had taken the word realistic and ran with it. All he was a quirkless genius, as others put it. That's not true. A soft, light voice cut through his mumbling. Midoriya felt heat creep into his face as he realized he had been talking aloud. The person let out a small cough as Izuku's eyes drifted over to a man with short-cut black hair in a doctor's outfit, a warm smile on his face as he looked at Izuku. "My name is Ido Nori. I'm here to evaluate you, but I don't think I want to do that. Instead, I'd like to talk more about why you are hurting yourself." Ido's face didn't change from the comforting smile as he told Midoriya this. Midoriya kept his face placid and retreated behind his walls. "Ah yes, I was warned that you were an emotionless brick wall by your school staff. Pretty harsh wording if you ask me. I mean, you know how to hide them well, but that work with me. So how about you give it up and have a talk with me?" Izuku narrowed his eyes as he studied the man. He felt a surge of irritation as the man stated that he could read Izuku. To his surprise, the man let out a chuckle and held his hands up defensively. "I apologize. I had no intention annoying you. Allow me to elaborate on what I mean. My quirk, E-Sense, allows me to feel the emotions of another person so I can feel everything you feel. That's very invasive of you," Izuku stated flatly. Ido let stifled yet another chuckle. "You are not wrong. However, it does help with my profession and it does help my patients, especially those who are very stubborn." He gave Izuku a knowing look that Izuku ignored in response. The pair sat in silence for seconds that stretched into minutes. Izuku looked everywhere but at Ido. He looked at the white sheets, the white walls, the white floors. Too much white he hated, too much of the same color. "You can ignore me for as long as you like, but that just prolongs your discharge." Izuku shot a glare at the man but finally relented. The placid mask crumbled. "Fine," he mumbled as he looked at the doctor, who simply nodded back. "Well, that's great, but my question still stands, Izuku. Why are you hurting yourself?" "I'm not hurt." "That's a lie, Izuku. What do you want me to say?" "I'm quirkless and my idol who I thought would support my dream of being a hero instead crushed them ruthlessly." He felt stinging as the tears rushed down his face. His hands hurt from gripping his legs so tightly he knew that it would leave bruises. "I can see why you had taken it to heart. It's by no means easy to be quirkless in today's climate, but Izuku, that doesn't mean that you are useless. It also doesn't mean that you need to give up on your dream. From what I know, you are one of the brightest minds in this generation. You could easily develop things to help yourself in your hero business." Izuku saw nothing but sincerity in the man's eyes and felt something burn in his stomach. "You're right, I know you're right." Izuku couldn't finish as he descended into tears. Ido patted him on the back and stood. "I'll be leaving. We've taken up too much time already and I have other patients. However, Izuku, what I said still stands no matter what your idol said. I hope you pursue your dreams." Without waiting for a response, he left the room. Izuku couldn't help but feel the growing burning in his stomach. He would do it. He would become a hero. "Ido, you know you could get in trouble for this." Ido looked at his colleague with a smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." He couldn't hide his smile. You know you're not allowed to use your full quirk on patients. You manipulated his emotions and made him more susceptible to suggestion. She grumbled in a low voice. Ido simply shrugged. I simply gave him a push in the right direction. One where his heart will be truly free from the shackles of his past. Nothing wrong with that. He let out a short laugh as he went down the hall to the next patient. School had resumed relatively unchanged, except for his workshop partner who proved to be more caring than he gave her credit for. They had prodded him for answers almost non-stop since he entered class. No matter how many quiet hums of assurance he gave her, the girl pressed on with the same questions, all of course while making babies. Are you sure you're fine? Sweat Boy said you were a little shaken up when he found you. She murmured as she began soldering a circuit board. Izuku shot the grease-stained girl a look. You talked to Kaken. May stiffened as she realized what she had said. Did I? Must have been your imagination. She cheerfully declared as she stiffly went back to work. Izuku simply sighed. The girl was a terrible liar, but getting the truth from her would be impossible. He'd have better luck with a brick wall. A tap on the shoulder took Izuku from his thoughts. Power Loader stood behind him and handed a hall slip. It's your appointment time with the principal. Izuku felt a rising irritation. Of course Nezu would want to meet after an event like this. After a couple minutes of working, May popped and grumbled to her partner, wait, what happened to our baby that was supposed to be tested? She looked over to find nothing but an empty seat. With a shrug she forgot about her annoyance and resumed work. Midoriya, please have a seat. Midoriya took the seat across from his principal and poured himself some coffee. They sat in a peaceful silence as they drank until finally Nezu spoke up. I'm afraid I'll have to be keeping this session short. In any case, I wanted to commend you on your actions the other day. They were very brave and went above and beyond your duty. Izuku kept his face calm and listless. On the inside, the swirling void of hate began making its course. He noted how Nezu had avoided the word heroic, and made a point to say he did more than needed. Oh, it was in a polite way, of course, but still didn't matter. It was still another quirk holder letting him know he didn't have one. It's what anyone would have done. He responded in a calm, measured breath, not wanting to give away his rage. Nezu simply nodded, then looked at the clock and seemed to slump. Well, looks like that's all my time. Feel free to stay here for the rest of the period. I have places to be, plans to make. It is sports festival time after all. Izuku nodded and sipped at his drink some more as the principal left. Midoriya sat in silence, taking in his surroundings. The office wasn't very decorticated, but it did host a wide range of books and cabinets. Time seemed to be crawling and Izuku could feel every second of it. It wasn't long before Izuku had turned the coffee table into his own design holder as he scribbled out different designs. Something was off, however. Each design he made felt off. He kept scrapping each of them as he drew more, only to trash them. His frustration began bubbling to the surface as he couldn't quite get any design out. After some more time he gave up. Never had this happened before. Izuku for the first time was unable to make anything. This shouldn't have been possible. He had always been able to design inventions for others, no problem. He could easily augment quirks. So why was he stuck now? You could easily develop things to help yourself. Midoriya sat silent as he looked at blank piece of notebook paper, his mind taking him back to Ido. The doctor had truly believed him to be a hero and even encouraged him to pursue it. The swirling hate that had been overwhelming him suddenly died. Instead, that same hot feeling began to form in the pit of his stomach. The feeling wasn't like the sludge and instead was comforting. Izuku stared at the paper and began thinking of an invention that could help him in hero work. It wasn't like it would replace a quirk at best, it would just be a cheap substitute. He'd be a copy of a hero, a cheap knockoff. Izuku began to smile as he looked at the paper. It was a smile that only ever happened before the day he was crushed. It was a true, genuine smile as he began working out his new invention. 2 weeks later, Izuku let out a whistle as he leaned back. He didn't expect to have such good results with his current project. He actually did even believe that he would get any results for the project. But the invention was coming along nicely. He heard the front door open and knew it was time for school. Not wanting his best friend to see his secret, he decided to meet him before he could barge into his room. As he left his room, he murmured to the crumpled poster of All Might under his bed, I already proved you wrong, but you just haven't seen it yet. Without looking back, he shut his room door. All right, everyone, the sports festival is in 2 days, everyone. Make sure you are prepared because this is a huge opportunity for you all. Aizawa droned on. Midoriya already toned him out as he pulled up his notebook and began working on his blueprints for an upgraded version of his top-secret invention. He knew that he wouldn't have a version 2 up and running for the sports festival, but the prototype would have to do. Bakugo tapped his shoulder, signaling a class change, meaning it was time to head back to the workshop for the day. This is amazing. Power Loader stared at the reports and tests of his students' invention in awe. You plan on revealing it at the festival? He inquired in a hushed tone. The green-haired boy nodded, and for the first time Majima saw something brand new in his student. The look of indifference was replaced by a resolute fire that shone brightly. The boy's eyes were no longer dull but shone with an intense ferocity. I will use it to win the sports festival, sensei. Bakugo waited at the school entrance for Izuku to come out. Something was different today. Deku had been up and ready for the day. He also didn't fall asleep once today. They had talked and joked normally, but Deku had seemed different, more assured. Bakugo felt a tinge of hope that the boy was finally returning back to his old self, or maybe something even better. He quickly got a hold of his mind before he got his hopes up too high. It wasn't long after that his friend exited the building with a bored expression etched on his face. They began walking in silence. Kaken. Deku stopped walking and turned to face the taller boy. Bakugo turned and stared at his friend. Is it about the festival? You know you don't have to compete if you don't want to, we can Jew. No, Kaken, that's not it. Katsuki looked at his friend and finally saw the raging fire in his eyes. It was the same fire that he felt when in battle or training. It was a sense of desire. A desire to be the best. I'm telling you that come the festival I'm going to be the winner. That means I will beat you at the festival. Bakugo stared at his friend in disbelief. Deku, who was quirkless, who was weak, who needed protection, who had tried. No, Bakugo shook his head. This was Izuku Midoriya, who was the smartest person in the room. The person who could dissect any and every quirk. The person who wouldn't just make assumptions. This was his best friend. He felt smile worm its way to his features. I'm not gonna lose to anyone, not even you. But you say you're gonna win, I better see you second place. Because I'm not gonna accept any lower from you after hearing this. So get ready, Deku, cause I'm gonna win against you. He shot his fist outward and waited. Midoriya had smirk on his face and returned it in kind. The two friends returned home in an energized silence. They couldn't wait for the festival. They couldn't wait to prove to each other. They both went straight to bed in anticipation of the next day. Izuku woke up before the sun had risen to finalize the prototype. With school letting them have the day off, he decided to work on his arsenal in full. He was allowed any invention of his making. Izuku had settled on his loadout. He would be bringing multi-purpose grenades, the Thought Bubble V3, 3 Cyclops, and finally his secret weapon. Just wait, All Might, I'll show you. Midoriya slipped on his welding goggles and began slaving away. In the UE staff room, the teachers sat around a table discussing the festival. The topic turned to contestants. When All Might spoke up, Majima, you can't be serious in letting Izuku Midoriya enter into the festival. I can understand the Hatsune girl, but the boy is different. He's quirkless and already at a disadvantage. Why allow him to suffer humiliation? All Might questioned. Power Loader looked up from the forms in front of him. With all due respect, All Might, I believe Izuku is entering it with clear intentions and don't think he'll be discouraged. I for one think he might even win. He gave the number one hero a smile as he went back to checking the forms in front of him. All Might sighed. There was no way Power Loader was of sound mind with this decision. However, he would respect it no less. In an underground base, location unknown. The figure watched the video again. The video was retrieved from a fallen drone at USJ. It showed an emotionless boy easily taking down villains with brutal efficiency. The boy knew every weak spot or limit of his enemy's quirks and used them to his advantage while incapacitating his foes with bombs of an unknown make. Well unknown before learning of the boy's merits. All for one now knew the genius that was Izuku Midoriya. An emotionally hurt genius, and one that he would get his hands on. With a sick smile on his malformed half-face, he began to laugh. Izuku Midoriya, how I have plans for you. Oh, Kaken. Hey, Izuku mumbled as the bigger boy began to advance on him. Izuku gulped as the bully let off small explosions. I heard you still have that stupid dream of being a hero, Deku. What did I tell you about that? He growled at the quirkless boy, who only shook in response. Unable to respond to the menacing boy, Bakugo only grew angrier as he stopped in front of the boy and waited for a response. Time seemed to drag as the boy had no response and continued to shake. I told you that a quirkless fuck like you should give up on being a hero, he shouted as he began a relentless assault. The smaller boy screamed out in agony as he felt the blows and searing pain of the attack. The angry laughter of the ashen blonde mixed with the wails of pain from the green-haired student. The scene seemed to melt away and was replaced with a similar one. Izuku sat at his desk waiting. The bell had rung and everyone had already left the school. Izuku, however, waited even longer, shaking. Finally, he seemed to get his breathing under control and slowly packed up his things and got up to leave. Just as he hit the threshold of the door, a fist smashed into his face, sending him sprawling into the empty classroom. Blood trickled down his nose as he looked up with knowing fear. Bakugo stood in the doorway flanked by his cronies. Think you were gonna go home free? Well, did ya? He screamed at the younger boy. Izuku couldn't stop the tears from falling. They came trickling down his eyes. The other boys began howling with laughter and mocking him. You really pissed me off today, answering questions like you're smarter than me. It really just sets me off. Your worthless existence really makes me mad. But he is smarter than me. I just couldn't accept it. The world faded and shifted again. A young Bakugo sat in the water of the stream, his heart racing from fear. He had just fallen into the river. None of the so-called friends dared to run to his aid. A hand obstructed his vision. His eyes traced the hand to the owner to see a young Izuku. Rage flooded his system as he looked at the other boy, who looked down at him with worry. He wasn't looking down at me. He was worried that I got hurt, and checked on me without hesitation. I was always envious of you, Deku. I was always envious of the fact that you were always more of a hero than I was. The world once again shifted. This time to a hospital room. Bakugo sat with his head between his hands. He was crying uncontrollably. The staff gave the boy distance, while two adults sat on either side of him. Izuku Midoriya and his mother tried to console him as he wailed. Inside the room was an unconscious Izuku, strapped to the bed and hooked up to machines. My envy and InvertedObsidian did this to you. I know you don't want to tell me, but it was my fault you ended up like this, Deku. Bakugo's eyes fluttered open as his alarm blared next to his head. He wiped the tears from his eyes as he got up to get ready for the day. Today was the day he would face off against his best friend. A pang of guilt tore into him as the thought crossed his mind. I have no right to even call you a friend, Deku. With that thought, Bakugo forced himself up and began to get ready. Izuku gently placed all of his equipment into the case. He had spent too much time on all of his festival gear to have a mistake ruin it all. He heard his door open but didn't have the chance to look up from his packing. Izuku, honey, is Katsuki not coming today? His mother asked quietly. Izuku finished his packing, then looked up at his mother. Kaken won't be over this morning. We both have to head to the school. And we're more than likely going to be enemies. He'll most likely be over in the night. He checked that he had everything one last time, then stood up and followed his mother to the front door. They stopped and looked at one another. Inko smiled but couldn't keep the water from flowing her eyes. Izuku, no matter what happens today, I am so proud that you are breaking out of your shell. I know you can win today. Before he could say anything back, she gave him a tight hug he awkwardly returned. When they pulled away, he smiled a genuine smile at his mother, then exited their apartment and left for the sports festival. The morning rushed by in a flash for Izuku as the preparations for the contestants was smooth and fast. He stood in the midst of a sea students. He noted the odd looks he got as they stared at his outfit. A pair of hands began groping him and feeling the exoskeleton he wore, which quickly ended the looks other students gave him and instead were sent to his lab partner. Izuku, why didn't you tell me you were working on such a magnificent baby? This is incredible, and what does it actually do? He turned and extracted himself from her grasp. I can't tell you what it does at the moment, but after the festival I'll be sending you the designs for version 2 so we can make an even better one. May seemed to glow at the idea of being able to see the inside of his suit, and she immediately nodded. Just as the girl was about to go on a tirade, the stadium went silent as the pro hero Midnight took the center stage. Izuku got bored once her speech started and began looking at the other students in attendance. All had a serious aura. Everyone here wanted to win and prove they were the best material for a hero. Izuku felt himself frown. He wasn't here for the same reason. He was here to prove. Deku. The roar shattered Izuku's train of thought as he looked over to the center of the stage. Standing staring at him was his best friend, a burning intensity in his eyes as they met each other's gaze. I won't give up the #1 spot to any of these extras. The only way I'm losing first place is if you can rip it from my grasp. The entire place was silent as all eyes drifted to Izuku. He was thankful for wearing the thought bubble so no one could actually see his face. Even as he thought that, he realized it didn't matter. None of them matter, their thoughts or opinions. There are only two people he had to prove himself to, and he would do just that. He would win this. The boos that erupted at them were nearly deafening, but Izuku couldn't hear them. Bakugo, on the other hand, began antagonizing them all. Once everything settled down, Midnight began explaining the rules to them all. I see that young Midoriya and Bakugo have made targets of themselves. Still, to make such a bold claim to the crowd is quite amusing. Also, what is your student wearing? Power loader. All Might looked over at his colleague, who seemed to be giddy with excitement as the students began to get ready for the obstacle course. All I say is that the full device's name is Doppelganger. With that, he went quiet and began watching the sea of students once more. All Might raised an eyebrow but let the question drop. He decided that he'd watch the boy in action and see why the boy had gotten the challenge. The sea of uniforms surged out as they pushed past each other to get a lead in the race. Izuku lost May in the surge and was shoved forward, being carried by the contestants. A loud explosion sent a certain blonde flying high and above the others. Bakugo exploded into the lead literally. Izuku felt his smirk settle in, the sludge nowhere to be felt. Instead, a firestorm of heat thundered in his veins. Form 2KB, activate max power and blowback interception. The suit responded and began to whirl to life. His oversized gauntlets opened up on the palm and began to radiate heat. Without a second thought, he mimicked the movements of the person he watched a million times. A flex of the fingers was all it took to send him soaring into the sky and over the sea of bodies. The roar of the crowd as they saw him fly up and begin following Bakugo with his own quirk was ear-shattering. Midoriya winced as he felt the feedback from the blast still race up his shoulders. Guess I'll have to work at the blowback reduction, he muttered as he surged forward. Class 1 was in shock as they saw a second Bakugo fly through the air. It didn't take long to realize who exactly they were watching. The entire class felt a surge of awe and competitiveness as they redoubled their efforts in the race. Deku, you crazy fuck. You actually did it. You fucking made a quirk. My fucking quirk, Bakugo roared as Izuku began racing by him side by side. What happened next shocked everyone who had met Midoriya. He flipped midair and dropped 20 small spheres from his belt. I'm gonna win. So out of my way, you damn extra. 20 different explosions rocked the sky with different elements raging and even slime spewed places. Bakugo was blowback and Izuku surged forward in the lead. Deku, the singed blonde roared as he regained his bearing and began his ferocious ascent to try and catch up. All the teachers sat in stunned silence. The whole stadium was silent in what they had just witnessed. Until President Mike shouted, "Just what the heck is Power Loader letting his kids make? Location unknown. Have you retrieved the subject?" "Yes, it proved quite easy. But why did you want this one in particular? I mean, he wouldn't make for a good Namo. He won't be undergoing that process. I just need his quirk. Then once I have that, you can dispose of his body however you like." Izuku and Bakugo traded explosion after explosion. They soared high above the large pit that was meant to slow the contestants. Bakugo let off a large explosion that propelled him off of the smaller boy like a rocket, shooting him into the lead. Izuku ignored the pain and memories that tried to flood his mind. He wasn't going to lose, not here. He began chasing after his friend. Fuel source running low. Unable to continue in Form 2, landing highly recommended. The alert flashed in his vision as his helmet relayed the system failures. Without hesitation, he began to let himself drop at an alarming pace. The cheers from the crowd began to turn into worried shouts. At the last moment, Izuku let off one last explosion to break the fall. It wasn't enough, and he began rolling and tumbling forward on the ground painfully. A sheet of ice coated the ground next to him, and Todoroki ran past him. Izuku forced himself up even as his body screamed in protest. "I really should have trained my body too," he grumbled as he staggered to his feet. By now, students began to rush past him onto the minefield. A quick glance revealed that all the fuel in his gauntlets was used up. With a quick series of commands, Izuku called for his drones. The 3 drones hovered around him. He had no time to waste as he saw Bakugo and Todoroki approaching the end of the race. The drones took his gauntlets from him and began flying up to a safe distance. Activate Form 1, IT maximum fuel usage in boots. The large clunky boots began to hum as the gears in them began to whirl. Ada landed beside him as he was blown back from trying to outrun the explosions. "Ada, if you had been going your full speed, then you would have cleared this easily." The class rep looked up at the usually silent boy with shock. "How did you know?" he demanded. The only response he got in return was Midoriya running past him at a blinding pace. The other students couldn't even react as he blurred past them, and the mines reacted to him. His visor lit up with different lines of color showing him routes he needed to take to avoid impact. One of the Cyclops hovering just above him calculating all the routes. He had been right in predicting that this speed would be too much for him to actually keep up with. "You're not beating me half and half." Bakugo sent an explosion at the other student's head. Todoroki countered with a blast of ice that created a large spike between them. "Your overconfidence is your own undoing," he shouted back as he pressed forward. "Oh fuck you." Bakugo cleared the new obstacle and again was side by side with Todoroki. As he prepared to set off another explosion, a blur of black and green zoomed by them, leaving a trail of small metal spheres. The blonde didn't get to finish as water exploded around them and the mines underneath went off. "Too much talk," Izuku said as he entered the finish line, and stopped in front of the entire crowd. Midnight raised her whip and screamed, "The winner of the race is Izuku Midoriya." The crowd exploded in surprised cheers and roars of approval. All Might sat in stunned silence. Was this really the same Quirkless boy from almost a year ago? This boy who now stood in the middle of the arena. The boy who began crying when he had heard the words and faced reality from All Might. The very same boy who began shaking uncontrollably when they had bumped into each other in the hall. He watched as Izuku took off his helmet, his sweat-soaked hair clinging to him in clumps. He stared straight at the teacher's box with an intense glare. All Might couldn't help but feel as though he was being stared straight at. He shook off the feeling once the boy began looking around. "Well, I believe you now see why I pushed for him to be in the festival. Him being quirkless has no bearing on his ability for greatness," Power Loader whispered to him. All Might, unable to speak, simply nodded his head. Bakugo stared at Izuku in shock. Both boys met each other's eyes. "I told you that I'm winning this festival, so you better settle for second place." Bakugo felt a smirk cross his face as his competitiveness clawed its way to the front of his mind. "No way in hell am I losing. You may have made your way to fight, but you're still leagues away from me," Bakugo shouted back. He's always been better, he thought with a stab of guilt. "Today I'll show you my feelings too. Tell her that I demand her to sabotage Izuku. I want her to destroy all of the progress that he's been making." A wicked grin appeared on the grotesque half-face of All for One as the live feed of the UE Sports Festival continued in the background. The screen showed a fierce-looking, green-haired boy as his cavalry rushed forward towards a red and white-haired kid. Just as the two were about to collide, a third party crashed into Izuku's team just as the bell rang out. "It's time we met my soon-to-be tool." Izuku pulled off his helmet and let out a sigh as he laid back into the chair. It was impossible to win every event. "Still sucks," he grumbled under his breath as he took out a screwdriver and began making adjustments to his helmet. The screen in the corner of the break room showing the current match between an ivy-haired girl and a yellow-haired boy that Izuku never bothered to remember the name of. With one glance, Izuku knew who the winner would be and grew disinterested. "You sure didn't come to play today." Izuku didn't look up at the sound of the voice as he rewired the thought bubble V2. He gave a hum of acknowledgement as he connected another series of wires. "It would be an insult if anyone didn't try their hardest in this competition. If anyone thinks that I'm going to be an easy win, then they'll eat their words." Izuku stopped working and looked up. He let out a soft cough. "Also, thank you, Jiru. What you said to me back at the hospital meant a lot." Jiru stared in shock. Izuku felt heat burn at his cheeks and threw himself back into his work. Jiru smiled at the progress the antisocial black hole in front of her had made. "No need to thank me. You were my hero." Jiru held back laughter at the shades of red Izuku turned as she spoke. She decided to spare him and pull out her phone and scroll through it. Izuku stared blankly at a pair of wires, his mind a jumbled mess. He had never felt that kind of reaction. He knew it was the teenage hormones it had to be. After some time, he heard his name called over the intercom. Cursing silently as he looked down at the still disassembled helmet, he bit his lip as he walked out of the room, leaving it be. There was nothing he could do about it. As he walked down the hall, he felt a hand tap his shoulder. He looked over at Jiru, who gave him a mischievous smile. "Kick some ass," she cheered as she grabbed his hand and gave it a fist bump before turning and heading to the stands. Izuku blinked as her receding form. He slapped his cheeks and roused himself back to the task at hand. "Time to kick some ass," he muttered under his breath. "Somebody quirkless like you must really hate normal people. I mean, look at you, cheating with that armor and mimicking quirks. That is what it is, isn't it? Just a suit that emulates your betters." Izuku stood frozen in his place, keeping a mask of apathy as his opponent Shinso shouted insults at him. Izuku supposed he was right. Doppelganger was a system to emulate quirks. However, Shinso was wrong in saying it emulated his betters. Doppelganger was designed to bring quirk users down a peg, to show just how easily quirks could be made. Shinso hurled more insults, but Izuku ignored them as he walked forward. He could see the slight flinch in his opponent when he refused to talk back. Izuku continued forward, unclipping his grenades as he did so. "Just you wait, All Might. I'll shove those words right down your mouth and watch you choke on them." The figure slipped into the break room after waiting for the area to clear out. She slid a chair to the door, not risking the chance that someone could walk in. She made her way to the table and eyed the high-tech helmet laying on it. She pulled out a chair and began adding modifications to it. After she was done, she slipped out of the room like a shadow. Izuku walked off the stage, not bothering to look at his unconscious opponent. Shinso turned out to be the least threatening opponent he could have gotten. Big talk for someone who was weaker. The quirkless freak Izuku entered the break room and stood frozen solid. Nezu sat at the table beside the #1 hero. Midoriya, congratulations on that victory. I am astounded by your talents in inventing support items and ability to dissect a situation. Come have some tea. Izuku rigidly moved forward. Young Midoriya, I must say you are impressive out there. All Might stood holding out a hand, the smile never moving, not so much as even twitching. Izuku noted. All Might let out an awkward cough as he dropped his hand. Young Midoriya, this festival has brought it to my attention that I owe you an apology, Midor. No, Izuku. All Might was cut off, his fist slammed into the table. All Might cringed by the sudden outburst and the snarl that he was receiving. Shut up. I don't need an apology from you, Izuku hissed as he glared at All Might. You don't get to say my name so casually or praise me. You destroyed my world. I idolized you, and what did that get me? Fuck all. Now that I'm proving myself is when you decide you have a change of heart. What a fucking joke. Take your apology and choke on it. Izuku felt his blood boil and he growled out his statement. His locked away anger and resentment bubbling to the surface, all his self-hate finding a new target. All Might just stared at him, unable to say anything, the fake smile still plastered across his face. Nezu held up a hand to calm Izuku as he cleared his throat. Mr. Midoriya, watch your language. I can understand why you are mad, but control yourself. Let All Might say what he has to, and then you can decide what to feel after. Izuku glared at the overgrown rodent, then back to his idol, but said nothing more. All Might moved from the table and prostrated on the floor. Midoriya, I apologized sincerely. I apologized for what I said back then. I was in a time where I myself had forgotten what it meant to be a hero. In my clouded mind, I told you what would crush you and made myself believe it was reality. The truth is, in my game and power, I had forgotten my roots. Nezu stood abruptly as All Might talked. Yagi, I told you not to. All Might pressed on, ignoring the protests. I was also quirkless before becoming a hero. All Might rushed out. A sense of relief flooded over him as he got it out. He knew this was the only way to get the young Midoriya to see him on equal terms and the only way to get him to forgive and move on. When All Might looked up, however, that was all shattered. Izuku looked down on him, shaking uncontrollably, his eyes burning with unhidden fury. "You fucking hypocrite," were the only words he muttered as he stormed out of the room. Toshinori looked up to see disappointment on Nezu's face. "I told you not to reveal that." There was no way he would have taken that positively. Toshinori felt his chest tighten. Had he ruined young Midoriya even further? Up next, the walking item dispenser Momo Yaoyorozu versus the technician Izuku Midoriya. The crowd erupted in cheers at the next match. Bakugo and the rest of Class 1 hummed with excitement as both contestants walked into view. Bakugo felt as a shudder ran through his body when he saw Izuku. He knew something was off by the scowl on his face and the barely contained rage that only he could see. "What happened, Deku?" he murmured as he sat forward. "Midoriya, I wish you good luck," Momo called out. Izuku didn't respond as he jammed his reassembled helmet on. Momo shrugged and waited for the match to begin. Izuku rushed forward in a blur as soon as Midnight gave the go-ahead. Momo's eyes widened in surprise before she dodged to the side just before Izuku could reach her. Not wasting a second, she produced a staff and shield. Once again, Izuku rushed forward without thought but was intercepted by a sharp jab from his opponent's weapon. The cycle repeated itself, Izuku getting closer each time only to be parried and struck. The crowd chanted for Yaoyorozu, only infuriating Izuku more. "It's a shame, Midoriya. I was prepared for a fight, but this isn't what I expected." "Oh well, thank you for wasting time and allowing me to win," Momo called out as she created an item. Izuku saw his opening and used his gauntlets to propel himself forward. Just as she grabbed the item, Izuku's eyes widened as stared at a small sphere in front of him. The sphere released a pulse. Midoriya's body went stiff as his suit locked up. His display sparked as he crashed onto the floor in a heap, the visor's feed cutting in and out with static. The crowd went silent as Izuku lay there unmoving. Fuck, 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 was all he could repeat as he began to force himself to stand. The crowd went wild as a distant voice explained what had just happened. Izuku tuned everything out as his mind raced. EMP, how could I have known she could make that? Damn it, come on, reboot, reboot. A small error message appeared in forefront of his visor. The League of Villains send their regards. Bakugo sat forward as he saw the blast knock Deku down. He felt his anxiety jump. Come on, Deku, you better not lose. The crowd began roaring with cheers, but Bakugo stared intently when it happened. First the helmet began to spark, then the suit as Deku forced himself to stand. Then the helmet exploded, followed by the suit. The cheers of the suit turned into screams of horror. Bakugo sat numbly as hospital staff walked by. No one glanced his way or even thought twice about the 1,000-yard stare the blonde was giving. Bakugo replayed the incident in his head on repeat over and over. One moment Deku was standing up, and the next instant he was engulfed in flames and was writhing on the floor. Just as quick as the explosions came, Yui staff were swarming and aiding the downed student. "Dear, I can already tell that you are blaming yourself and you need to stop." Bakugo felt himself shrink as he heard her voice. Slowly he looked at Inko Midoriya. She smiled back at him. He felt his heart break as he saw the tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I couldn't protect him. This is my fault. If I never pushed for him to apply, then this would never have happened." He felt his throat close as he sobbed. It was his fault that Deku was hurt. It was the second time he put him in a hospital. Inko leaned over and hugged him tightly, gently rubbing his back. Bakugo finally let his tears flow freely as he sobbed into her shoulder. Mitsuki sat down beside her son and softly patted his back, letting him expunge all of his pent-up emotions. "The doctor said that Izuku should be exiting surgery soon. They told me to brace for the worst. He's been really hurt," Inko said, holding back her own tears. The fear of losing her baby shredded her heart. "Izuku is a strong kid. He's gonna pull through this," Mitsuki said calmly. She looked over at her son and best friend and felt a pang of sadness stab at her. She needed to be strong for the both of them if the worst did come to happen. "What part exactly did you think gave you the go-ahead to try and kill the kid?" Shigaraki shouted as he squeezed down on Momo's neck, still careful to not let all 5 fingers touch. The girl squirmed, tears building up at her eyes. Finally, he dropped her to the floor and delivered a vicious kick to her downed form. "Thanks to your bright idea, Sensei is furious. I should just kill you here and now to save us time." Slowly raising to her feet, Momo kept her head down and didn't say a word. "You were supposed to deliver the message and hurt him. Now we don't know if he'll survive the day." Momo gulped as Shigaraki began breaking tables and chairs in a frenzy. "Shigaraki, I believe that is enough. What we need to do is watch. If he does survive, what will the boy do? Will he report it the pro heroes or will he keep quiet? Say he does report it, then that means we need to break him down further. However, if he does not, then we can assume that his spirit has been broken once again and proceed with the next phase." Kurogiri chimed in, not bothering to look up from the glass he was cleaning. Shigaraki grunted in a reply before sitting in an intact chair. Tell me, are you being investigated? Momo looked up as he addressed her. She bit back her earlier fear and cleared her throat. No, the staff believes that it was some malfunction within his device that caused the incident. They believe that he must have miscalculated while putting the suit together, and when it short-circuited from the EMP is when the problem came to a head. Power Loader has been put on administrative leave while they have a pair of unbiased support heroes look at the schematics sent to them. I intercepted the signal and sent an adjusted schematic so that they will find Power Loader to be at fault for approving something with a serious safety issue. Kurogiri gave her a look of approval while her child of a boss simply continued to look at a wall. Fine, continue to gather information. You are also to monitor Midoriya to the best of your abilities. We need to know what he will do. Now get out. Shigaraki growled. Momo didn't wait and turned as a portal opened behind her. Once she was away from her associates, she let out a shaky breath and sat down on her bed. What is so special about Izuku Midoriya? Inko, Mitsuki, and Bakugo looked up as a doctor approached them, and Ko stood to meet him. Mrs. Midoriya, Izuku is being transferred to intensive care. We were able to stabilize him. There were some complications, however. His face was heavily damaged by the shrapnel caused by the helmet. It will leave permanent scarring. Not only that, but he has severe burns spanning his back and arm. They should heal with time, but again the marks will stay with him. Lastly, Izuku's right arm had to be removed. When his suit combusted, the shoulder piece tore open and ripped into his arm. By the time Recovery Girl had gotten to him, the arm had already been nearly shredded. The doctor stopped and let them process what he had just revealed. Bakugo and his mother rushed forward to support Inko as she began weeping. I am sorry. However, Midoriya was able to be saved and he should be able to live a normal life with some adjustments. Bakugo grinded his teeth as he heard the doctor speak. Deku didn't want normal. Deku was going to be the best inventor. Hell, he was going to be the #1 hero with how he was performing. Will we be able to see him? Inko sobbed as she looked up from the floor. Of course, in 20 minutes Izuku will be allowed visitors. The front desk will be able to tell you what room he is in. Before that, however, would you please follow me? Insurance and payment plans need to be discussed. Our hospital has a— One moment please. A voice cut into the doctor's words. All heads turned to see Aizawa and Nezu walking over. Mrs. Midoriya will not have to pay a thing. All of Izuku's expenses will be covered by Yui. Inko looked down at the principal with an unreadable expression. He turned his attention to her when the doctor simply nodded at the announcement and walked off with Aizawa following closely behind. Now, Mrs. Midoriya, first and foremost, I want to extend my deepest apologies. What happened to your son was a failure on of the Yui staff's fault. Even with all the staff and pro heroes in attendance, we still failed you and your son. I myself feel especially responsible for what happened. I had met with Izuku before his match and should have been able to see that he was not in a state to participate. I truly believe that Izuku's mind was elsewhere, and that was one of the leading factors to this tragedy. The biggest one being my failure to act accordingly and ensure his safety. Nezu bowed deeply as he talked, a slight tremor in his stance as he remembered the anger and state of mind Izuku had been when he left the break room. A hand tapped his shoulder as Inko knelt down to comfort the head of Yui, a small smile on her face. I understand. I hold no one responsible for this. I'm just glad Izuku is okay. If you don't mind, I would like to see my son. Without waiting, Inko stood and began making her way to the front desk, followed closely by the Bakugos. The group walked in silence, all lost in their thoughts. Within minutes, the group made it to the front desk to witness something Bakugo and Inko never thought he would ever see. Look, we're telling you. We are friends of Izuku Midoriya. We go to the same school, same class even. I don't care about the rules of some hospital. He and I make babies and we will keep making them, and I refuse to leave till I get to see him. Bakugo and Inko stood in stunned silence as they watched the scene unfold. A pink-haired girl covered in grease stood on top of the counter kicking back security, tears in her eyes as she shouted about making more babies. Almost all of class 1 trying to calm her down while Gyro and Uraraka argued with a very overwhelmed receptionist. Bakugo peeked over at Inko to see a fresh set of tears pouring down her cheeks. Bakugo bit back his smile as he watched the idiots in front of him fight to see Deku and let out a whistle. All heads snapped to his direction. Where the fuck are your manners? This is a damn hospital. Plus you're making Mrs. Midoriya cry. Bakugo ignored the murderous intent he felt bore into his back. He'd have to deal with his mom later. Sweat boy, May shouted as she jumped down and pushed past everyone. She looked into his eyes, tears still falling. He's gonna be okay. Now stop crying. He awkwardly patted her head in an attempt to comfort. But all he got in return was May breaking into a full-blown sobbing cry. Her wails were quickly muffled as she was pulled into a hug by Inko. It's okay, sweetie. Izuku is fine. A little banged up, but fine. You know, Izuku talks about you almost as much as his inventions. I'm glad he has such a caring friend, and it's great to finally meet you. May sobbed harder into her shoulder as she whispered into her ear. Mitsuki walked over to the front desk and began smoothing over the nurse. May's wails died to whimpers as Inko kept her in a motherly embrace. We'll be able to see my son in a bit, and of course you're all welcome to visit. Some of the students walked over to a bench to clear up space. Bakugo's eyes narrowed as he scanned the classmates he saw. Yo, shark teeth. Kirishima smiled as Bakugo waved him over. Hey, how are you doing, man? He whispered as he stood by the ashen blonde. It's not unmanly to cry or let your emotions show. I mean, your best friend was just hurt, so don't be afraid to vent, man. Bakugo felt his eyes sting for a moment before he regained control of himself. Oh yeah, thanks, I'll think about it. However, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to know if you knew where that stuck-up bit. Bakugo stopped mid-sentence and took a deep breath before turning to face the only person in class that could bear his personality. I wanted to know if you talked to little Miss Princess. Kirishima's eyes softened as he shook his head. Sorry, can't say that I did. I did hear from the girls that she was an absolute mess. Momo was crying non-stop and blaming herself for the whole event. Apparently the staff sent her home to be with her parents and told to take as much time as she needs. You don't plan on doing anything to her, right? He added on the last part with a hint of accusation. I just want to talk to her is all. Mistakes happen and Deku makes a lot of tech, so it's not insane to think that the EMP boosted the problems with his design. Kirishima blew out a sigh of relief. You had me worried there. I'm just glad you're being calm about this. Bakugo only nodded in response as his mother waved him over. We're going to see Izuku. He's been put in his new room, but the staff said that he's going to be kept under for a while. Actually, a medical-induced coma, so he won't be awakened until he's in a better condition. Bakugo felt his chest tighten as his mother spoke. Take a breath. Just breathe. He's going to be fine. He's alive and in good care. You didn't do this. Bakugo looked around the room until he focused on counting the number of lights. Finally, his chest eased and he let out a breath. Honey, are you coming? Bakugo nodded as he jogged to catch up. The sun began to set. Everyone had long since left, all but 2 students. May pulled her chair closer to Izuku as she worked on folding another crane. Bakugo quietly worked on folding some on the other side of Izuku's bed. He looked at his friend again. Barely any part of Deku was visible. He was bandaged just about everywhere. Bakugo avoided staring at the place where Izuku's right arm should have been. Feeling the rush of nausea, he went back to focusing on spent the next hour quietly folding cranes for their friend until Bakugo finally felt it was time to talk. May. The pink-haired girl looked up in surprise as her eyes locked on and focused on him. You know inventing just as good as Deku did. I don't know jack about creating things from scrap like you two do. That being said, I know Deku. He's never once made an invention that wasn't properly tested, and he definitely never would have used that suit if it was a risk to anyone else. It was sabotage. Plain and simple. Izuku always lectured me about limitations and safety in a baby. Good to know that you were already going down that path. May interrupted him, staring coldly at the paper in her hand. Bakugo let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The way things are looking, the school believes Deku was clouded in judgment, but that's a lie. He had been clear and focused on what he wanted. I'm going to find out what really happened, but to do that I need your help. I'm in. May's hand crumpled the paper up as she began to shake. Believe me, I already started looking into it. I have what's left of Izuku's helmet at home. When I get home, I'll start searching it for clues. Bakugo stood, as did May. I have to go find someone. Message me if you find anything. May nodded as they both packed up their things and left. Bakugo let out a sigh as he reached the final step at the top of the shady apartment complex. He pulled his hood closer in, keeping his distinctive hair hidden. I'm just being overly paranoid is all. With one last sigh, he walked over to the door he'd been looking for and began gently knocking. After 30 seconds, the sounds of latches and bolts being flipped open. Higari Majima poked his head out and looked over the blonde with wariness. I guessed you would come sooner or later. Look, kid, I didn't set Izuku up. I was rooting for him, so. He stopped as Bakugo held up a paper for him to read. Higari's eyes narrowed and looked back to the student. Inside now. He stepped aside, holding the door open, ushering the student in. Once inside, Higari began locking the door and flipped some electrical switches on a very haphazard switchboard. There we can talk freely. Bakugo sighed in relief as he pulled his hood. Higari walked over and sat on an opposite couch. So you also believe that Izuku was set up? That is comforting to know. However, I would like you to give your reasoning before we continue. Higari sat forward, his full attention focused. Well, me and May know Deku better than anyone else at this point. He would have never left a mistake that serious in his suit. If the suit did have a mistake like that, then B wouldn't have used it in the competition. The school was really quick to jump to a conclusion that it was a mistake by him and you. That frankly is just bullshit. They should have investigated the incident. Instead, this just seems like a mad dash to the wrong conclusion. Bakugo fell silent as his mind whirled with possibilities. Higari nodded once he finished giving his reasoning and smiled. I agree. I have no doubt that something's at work here. That being said, we also can't just jump to conclusions the same as the school. I doubt that you have been watching the news recently. There has been a frenzy. Higari frowned while stopping wordlessly. He stood up and fixed drinks for himself and his guest. Every news outlet is hyper-focused on Yui right now. The League of Villains attack on USJ. The media breaking into the campus just before that attack. Now finally a Quirkless student getting grievously hurt at the festival on live feeds across all of Japan. The networks are currently clawing for an answer in this matter. Publicly, no official has been made aside from announcement that classes will be suspended for the next 3 days. We just don't know enough information at the moment to make baseless accusations. Way too many variables running at once. My suggestion to you is to begin digging around. Try your classmates. I can also assume that Hatsune wants Izuku's designs. Bakugo stopped scribbling on his notepad and looked up. Yeah, do you happen to have a copy of those? Higari groaned as he stood and stretched before he left the room. After some time he entered with a manila folder and held out for Bakugo. Only other copy aside from the files at Yui. Izuku was very serious on keeping this project top secret. You better hurry up and get that to me. If it was sabotage, then she's the only one who can sniff it out. Bakugo stood putting the folder and his notebook into his bag. He walked towards the door, pulling his hood up when he felt a hand on his shoulder. When you discover the person or persons who did this, don't hesitate to immediately go to the school, but only report it to Aizawa. He's the only cool-headed one at the school right now, was always good under pressure. He patted the boy on the back as he saw him out. Good luck, Bakugo. Bakugo made his way to the train station, his mind racing 1,000 miles a minute. There was so much and not enough information to go off at the same time. He just wanted to scream and just talk to Izuku. Talking to Izuku would solve half of his problems. I'm being stupid. Deku wouldn't have this much difficulty. What would Deku say to him right now? You're overthinking it. Bakugo muttered to himself and stopped on the middle of the platform to the annoyance of the other people around. I am overthinking things. All I need to do is let Mei work her magic and just talk to the list of suspects. Bakugo took out his phone and began scouring the internet for an address, and after one quick search he had the Yaoyorozu's address. Mei stared at the pieces in front of her. The twisted sphere that had once been a helmet now sat on the floor next to her feet. Mei folded her hands and placed her chin on top of them. She had no idea what to look for. She had salvaged the parts and pieces she could. One of the pieces saved was a small black rectangle that was sturdy and seemed unscathed. This was the piece that stumped her. It wasn't anywhere on the plans Izuku had made, however. It was snugly fit inside his helmet. Every other part had experienced some form of damage, but this part had been intact. Mei bit her lip as she made a note of it before setting it aside. Weird and unlike Izuku. But I can't figure out what this piece had even been for. Best to leave. Mei stopped. She slowly turned in her chair and stared at her own thought bubble hanging on her bedpost. I'm so sorry, baby. It's for the greater good. Her voice cracked as she stood and gingerly took the helmet. I promise that me and Izuku will make you again. She closed her eyes and took a breath, mentally steeling herself for the crime she was about to commit. Mei set the helmet on her work desk. The swing bounced off the metal plating, leaving no trace of a hammer strike. Mei stood up and pulled her goggles down. The cacophony metal being bashed finally ended when her helmet was left in ruin. Mei scoured the ruins. A surge of elation rushed through her as she didn't find a similar rectangle in her helmet. Okay, this still doesn't prove that it was tampered with. Izuku could have added it in during the tournament, but still I can't know for sure without learning what exactly this thing is. Mei stopped pondering as her eyes drifted to her matter mover. It was actually just an unstable plasma cutter, but no one else needed to know about that. Mei stared at the black rectangle. All she had been able to successfully do was barely scorch the surface. Just what the hell engine was this thing? If this was Izuku's design, then what was it made of? And if it was the saboteurs, then just who was able to get this? She let out a screech of frustration as tears of rage bubbled forth. A head of pink poked her head in, a gentle smile on her face. Mei, sweetie, are you okay? Mei placed the hammer on her desk and spun to face her mother, a frown on her face. Her mother stepped into the room, careful not to step on anything. Honey, what's the matter? Is it about Izuku again? Mei didn't feel like looking up from the floor but gave a sigh as her answer. You went to see him yesterday and he was fine, right? Is there something else? She bent down and lifted her daughter's head to look into her eyes. It's just that I'm looking for answers and I keep hitting walls. Izuku became a serious part of my baby-making process, and without him I can't read the writing he's left behind. I miss him. Mei mumbled the last part as her mother squished her cheeks. A wide grin spread across her face. You sure like you think about him a lot. And talk about him. I swear you can't go a day without talking about Izuku. Her mother let out a small giggle. Izuku will be fine after rest. And of course he is going to take time for him to get used to his handicap. You said he's become a core part of making babies. Then shouldn't the same be said for him? Mei stared at her mom. Was the answer so simple? Mom, I need to go visit Izuku's house. Her mother smiled and let go of her daughter. Well, it's only 12 in the afternoon. I'll give Mrs. Midoriya a ring, and if she gives us the go-ahead, then I'll take you there. Her mother left the room while Mei shoved items into her pack. She grabbed all the loose parts she had pulled from the damaged helmet and put them in. She took out her phone and tapped till she heard the dial tone begin. Come on ... come on ... co. Bakugo. No, I didn't actually find anything new. A suspicious item, yes, but I need more, and the only place I'll get those answers are from Izuku himself. Yes, I know he's still under. I meant that I'm going to his house. Mei's mother smiled as she began walking away. Oh, how she was so proud of Mei falling for a boy in her own weird Mei way. Mei curiously looked around Izuku's room. The room was a mess. That was saying a lot coming from her. She suppressed a laugh as she realized that she was cleaner than Izuku, at least when it came organizing her workspace. Mei noted the countless babies in various states of progress. The sheer amount made her heart soar. It was as if Izuku never slept. Focus, she scolded herself mentally. Mei made her way to his desk and took a seat. She took a breath and took out the pieces and placed them in front of her. Mei stood and began looking through notebooks and looking at the corresponding baby. After what seemed like an eternity, Mei plopped down and looked at the checklist again. All but one was checked off. Every component matched except for the black box. Mei closed her eyes. Sabotage the box was sabotage. But what did the box do? Izuku was fine one moment. During the fighting was hit by N. Was it that simple? Had she been that overtaken by tunnel vision? Mei stood gathering a few items and slipped out the back door. Mei stood back looking at the dormant Cyclops silently. Mei brought the drone to life while priming the MPG she took from Izuku's absurd collection of them. Mei and Izuku had designed the drones to withstand the output of electricity from the MPGs, so this shouldn't have done anything. That's what Mei was thinking as the electricity surged to the drone. Mei jumped the fence in the backyard just in time to avoid the debris from the Cyclops as it exploded. Mei, what happened? Mei let out a shaky breath as stood. I'm fine. Mei wobbled back to the Midoriya's yard. His body shook with each step. Mei ignored the questions from the concerned mothers as she walked to the wrecked drone. In clear view was a shiny black box. Bakugo buzzed the gate as he stared past the gate and into the elegant mansion beyond. Nice place. Snobby as shit, but still nice, I guess. Bakugo snickered as his thoughts when the speaker crackled to life. Please identify yourself and state your business. My name is Bakugo Katsuki. I go to Yui with Momo Yaoyorozu. I was coming to check up on her. Bakugo nearly gagged as he heard his own voice dripping with sweetness. I'm afraid that you have just missed her. She went to go visit her injured classmate. I can take a mess. Bakugo began running at top speed back to the train station. He ripped his phone out as he turned a street corner. Shark teeth, where are you? I need a favor. Can you check up on Izuku for me? I'm on my way there now. No, there's no time, just get there. Bakugo screamed into his phone before shoving it into his pocket and running faster. Momo stood next to Izuku's bed. She stared at the sleeping form. If only he had died in the explosion, then she wouldn't be in this position. I don't see what's so special about you. You're quirkless, average, bland. Why does the League want some disabled freak? I envy you though. You have no looks to maintain. No relationships to be formed for ulterior motives. You don't have to stand on ice, while every move I make sends cracks in all directions. No one expects anything from you. Momo gripped the knife as her rage began to boil. She let the weapon drop back into her purse as her phone vibrated. She took out the small black flip phone and held it to her ear. Yaoyorozu, a meeting has been called. Head to the usual location now. I'll be waiting. Momo sighed as the line went dead. Saved by villains, lucky you. She looked one last time at Izuku before leaving. Bakugo rushed into the room only to be greeted by a relieving sight. Kirishima, Gyro, Kaminari and Mina all sat around the sleeping Deku working on more cranes for the already large collection around his room. Yo, Bakugo. What was the matter? We came here expecting to find a villain. Kaminari called out. Bakugo felt his knees turn to jello as the adrenaline leave his system. He took a seat by Kirishima and began attempting to fold a crane with his shaky hands. I was being paranoid is all. I had a feeling that something was happening is all. Just anxiety. Kirishima gave him a pat on the back. He smiled at Bakugo. It's all good, man. I got your back. I appreciate you relying on me, dude. He whispered to him. Izuku's fine. We even saw Momo as we came in. Poor girl looked like she was still blaming herself. This was no one's fault, Mina said as she placed a crane on top of the heart monitor. Bakugo kept his face calm. Visiting him isn't an admission of guilt, and I still don't know if she's even responsible. Bakugo shook the thoughts from his head as the three classmates stood. When's the last time you ate? Mina bent down and glared at him. Yesterday. Why? Bakugo hissed in pain as Mina rewarded him with a chop on the head. That settles it. You are coming with us. Bakugo protested as his classmates ganged up on him and began removing him from the place. Momo sat at the bar staring at the TV screen, waiting. Shigaraki and Kurogiri also waited. An air of tension permeated the room until he broke the silence. I have taken some time to compose myself, but now I have come up with a plan and a list of what needs to be done. Firstly, Yaoyorozu, your cover and spy status needs to be kept. It is imperative that we keep your cover intact, and that is why we need someone to take the fall for you. We need to get ahead of all possibilities and bring up the sabotage ourselves. Secondly, Izuku Midoriya will recover, and when he does, he will be a threat. He no doubt will tear through any facade we set up. To avoid such an occurrence, we will kill Izuku Midoriya, or at least that will be what the world believes. Momo nodded along with Kurogiri. She felt a smile creeping its way onto her face. Bakugo sat on Izuku's bed, his notes scattered all around him. Mei sat slumped over Izuku's desk, her eyes focused on the small black box. 2 days had passed since they made these small movements in their investigation. Still any proof that it was Yaoyorozu trying to kill Izuku? She mumbled out as she flicked the black box of death. Bakugo groaned in response. None. The chick has been locked in her house, and whenever she decides to leave, it's impossible to track her down. It's suspicious. But what I'm doing ain't exactly legal. He swept his arm around the printed out photos. Either the police would consider this as stalking. What about you? Any hits on that death box? Bakugo didn't bother to look up from his own work. Mei grinded her teeth as she looked at the infernal box. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, I found similar designs from the internet. That probably put me on another list, by the way. But yes, seeing as I still can't even open the box, it's just guesswork. All I can say with certainty is that it's meant to overload the system of whatever it's connected to. More a fail-safe to shut everything off in machinery. However, this one is so cranked up that it turns everything into overdrive when hit by a sir. Are you evening listening? Bakugo looked up from his notes in surprise as he looked over to the furious pink cat. Nope, I stopped a while ago. You already told me all of this, Alria. Ack. He ducked as a wrench soared past his head. He glared at Mei, who had already turned back to trying to open the box for the millionth time. Fucking psycho, he muttered before looking over the photos for new clues. I don't see why you won't just let me dispose of her myself. It's simple, I already have tons of. Bakugo held up his hand. No, end of discussion. Mei sat back and stuck her tongue out at him. He returned the gesture with one of his own. They fell back into silence as they began looking to their respective leads. This cycle continued until a knock on the door roused them from their routine. Bakugo quickly threw a cover over his files. Mei spun while pocketing the box. Inko poked her head in, a smile on her face. Are you too hungry? I made lunch. You can help yourselves to it. I'm going to visit Izuku again. Mei jumped up and rushed over to wrap her arms around her. Thank you. Also, we'll be over to visit him later tonight. You deserve some alone time with him. Inko hugged the girl back and smiled. You two never make me feel like he's being pulled away from me. If anything, it's wonderful to see the great people he's made friends with. She placed a kiss on Mei's forehead before saying her goodbyes. Mei walked out the room and made her way to the kitchen. Bakugo threw off the cover his work and went back to trying to nail the dumb bitch to Izuku's sabotage. The only real good piece of evidence he had gotten was on Jiro's account of seeing her slip away from the crowd during Deku and the shit-talkers' fight. He rubbed his temples as he thought more about it. It wasn't enough. She could just say she had to slip out to use the bathroom. Bakugo sighed. He supposed it was time to visit Aizawa. He brought up his phone, checking the time. He nodded as he gathered up all of his files and pictures. Aizawa was sensible enough to not deny that this was enough evidence to at least look in. He shoved it all in his bag as he ran down to Mei. He grabbed her just before she took a bite of the food in front of her and began dragging her out. Hey, what are you? Where are we going? Mei exclaimed as she was dragged along. We're going to visit the only person in that school that'll help. Howard Loader. Bakugo stopped in his tracks and looked back at his partner. Fine, second person. He grumbled as they began walking again. Momo sat at the bar, a pair of blueprints in front of her. Kurogiri stood nearby fixing up a new plate of food. It had been a boring work-filled day. Yaoyorozu, I must ask, is anyone on to you? Momo kept her face even. She looked up from the plans and raised an eyebrow to Kurogiri. Don't give me that look. You forget who you are talking to. I know about that little hospital visit you made without telling us. Good thing too, because I have a very interesting recording of an heiress poorly hiding a knife. Momo felt her heart drop. Suddenly she didn't want to be in the den of vipers anymore. Judging from that reaction, you hadn't even thought about cameras. I wonder what does that make this? The 10th blunder I've had swept under the rug. For a top student, you make plenty of mistakes. If Tamura were to find out, you would more than likely have to be replaced. Kurogiri had lost his usual calm and let his irritation show. Momo felt her mind swirl to all the actions she had done of her own accord. She had planned for Midoriya to die in her sabotage, so she had added in a special message to him. However, it was possible he wouldn't even remember it. Was that such a wise assumption? Kurogiri, I assure you that there will be no more blunders from her on out. It's fine, the pros are still blind to my actions. Nazu, for all his intelligence, has eaten every scheme I set. I have nothing to worry about. The corners of her mouth quirked upward as she stroked her own ego. I will take your word for it. However, this will be the last time I clean up your mess. Also, don't forget that the plan is tomorrow, so be prepared. Kurogiri held out a hefty plate of rice for her. Also, we need that new shipment of arms done by tonight. so double up on the food intake. I'll be taking you to the shop once you're ready. Momo nodded as she began eating, her mind already forgetting the disdain for Izuku and the attention he has gathered. Bakugo stood in front of Yui, Mei shooting dirty looks every other second. He sighed as he felt the swirling heat of rage churn through his blood. So did you think they lived here? I mean, I get it, I would live in the workshop if I could. But Majima-sensei keeps finding me somehow. Her face scrunched up as her mind recalled all the times she has been caught breaking in during the night. I at least thought with all the media coverage that they would be working around the clock to figure out the truth. Bakugo muttered through clenched teeth. Mei stepped into his sight, a serious look on her usual carefree face. They don't care. They mostly likely found the simplest answer and took it to save face. We are going to be the only ones to be able to help Izuku. Bakugo sighed as he nodded in agreement. Maybe we could try Power Loader. Mei smiled and agreed as she began pulling the blonde along. How do you know where he even lives? He screeched as Mei happily dragged him along. Simple, I just learned how long it takes him to get to the workshop in response to my breaking and entering. That's not okay. Mei ignored the scolding that Bakugo threw at her, humming to a tune that only she could hear. Those two are way too inquisitive for their own good. They would make a wonderful pair of detectives. Mei is a borderline criminal. Genius inventor, still needs to learn rules. Are we sure about leaving them in the dark though? They might get hurt themselves or endanger others. Already have that covered. Have 24/7 video feeds on them. And my drones are high enough to not be noticed. New models are also extremely silent. All right, I concede. Any word on their movements? None yet. It's only a matter of time. Mei and Bakugo sat on the train. The sun had long since set. Power Loader hadn't been home, which had ruined all of their plans for getting assistance. Bakugo looked over at the snoozing bundle of energy and shook his head. He had no idea how Deku kept pace with her. He had spent this day with her and felt like he had aged 10 years. Bakugo closed his eyes just as soon as his phone began vibrating. What the fuck is it now? With a grumble, he ripped his phone out, only to stare at it in confusion. It wasn't a number he recognized. He raised his phone to his ear and felt his blood burn. Ah, is this Bakugo? I was just calling to let you know that me and the rest of the class will be visiting Midoriya tonight. I was hoping we could all finish his cranes before he wakes up. Yaoyorozu's voice came out of the speaker. Bakugo resisted the urge to blow up his phone to high hell. Oh, sure, I'll be going, of course. In fact, I was already on my way there. How thoughtful of you. Bakugo clenched his free hand as he fought with his own rage. He shook as he listened to the sickly sweet voice. Oh, I had no idea. That's amazing news. We're all almost there. It's going to be a wonderful night. I look forward to seeing you there. Anyway, I must be going. Mina is trying to show me something on her phone. The line cut before he could get another word in. Bakugo sat in silent fury. He so desperately just wanted to attack her. As far as he cared, she had done it. But of course they didn't. Definite proof. Bullshit, he hissed as he sat up. A hand on his shoulder made him jump up as he stared to his side. Mei was watching him with concern. He closed his eyes as he began counting down in his head. Your hand is bleeding and it'll get worse if you keep digging your nails into it. Bakugo continued counting but let his hand unclench. He felt cloth wrap around it. After some time he opened his eyes. Emotion in check, he held his bandaged hand up. Thanks, he muttered. Mei merely nodded as she looked out the window. Bakugo realized who he was with and let out a curse. Hey Mei, I think you should head home. Bakugo flinched as the girl was on him in a second, collar clenched in fists. A very scary-looking Mei in his face. You really think I didn't hear who was on the other side of the call? Oh, I'm going to visit Izuku, and after I make sure he's alright, I'm going to cave her skull in with a wrench. And I'm going with a wrench because I don't have plastic explosives on me. Bakugo looked at her in horror. Plastic explosives. He opened his mouth but Mei beat him to it. Yes, I have that. And no, I won't tell you how I got a hold of it, nor will I tell you where I keep it. She hissed at him. He could only manage a no in return. Look, Mei, I am all for getting back at that bitch, but we can't kill H. Wrenched ahead. Done, it's not that complicated. She cut him off with a growl. Bakugo sent out a prayer to whoever her future husband was. He gently removed her hands from his collar and placed his hands on her shoulder. No, Mei, if you go to jail, they won't let you make babies and then you wouldn't have anything to live for. Mei sat back and crossed her arms, a groan set into her features. For Izuku it would be worth it, she muttered underneath her breath. Bakugo raised an eyebrow but chose to wisely not to comment. Well, the good news is that if she does try anything, then we can attack her. That being said, we have to play nice. Fine, I can play nice. Bakugo closed his eyes and sent out a prayer. Give me the strength to control myself too. Bakugo and Mei sat on either side of Izuku. The rest of Wana sat scattered throughout the room. The room was filled with an air of ease and calm. Bakugo dared a peek over at Mei. His pink-haired demon of a partner stared daggers into a miniature paper version of Yaoyorozu. Bakugo was just thankful that she had the sense to keep it hidden from everyone else. Bakugo kept an eye on Yaoyorozu every time she moved, his paranoia at its peak. Mrs. Midoriya is gonna love it the next time she comes here. She won't believe that we got them all done. Hagakure squeals excitedly. A chorus of agreements went up from the other girls. They looked over at Bakugo, a question on her face. Bakugo looked back with the same question. Where was Inko? She said she was going to be here. Bakugo looked over to a smiling Yaoyorozu as her eyes were glued to the wall clock. Momo paid no mind to her surroundings as she smiled. It was finally time for them to enact their plan. A misty black portal tore open in the center of the waiting room. Shigaraki stepped out, followed by a small army of villains. Immediately he knew something was wrong. Kurogiri stepped beside him once everyone had stepped through. They scanned the view in front of them in confusion. Yo, they whirled around and stood in shock. Aizawa sat with a malicious smile plastered on his face. The hospital staff and residents have been relieved. We'd be more than happy to help you, Aizawa said as he looked over a clipboard in front of him. Out stepped other Yui staff as Shigaraki screamed for an attack. The pros rushed forward to meet them. Momo cautiously eyed her classmates. The group had erupted into a full argument from all parties. She kept her distance from them as they continued to argue about the course of action they had yet to take. What exactly is taking Shigaraki so long? She scowled as she took another glance at the clock. Hiroshima pushed past as he shouted something about being a hero. Gyro and Mina tried to shout over the others to get a hold of the situation. Bakugo and Mei had yet to move from Midoriya's bedside. Momo reflexively reached for the knife hidden in her belt. She stopped and shifted the motion into fixing her shirt. It's time that I take control of this situation. With a loud whistle, she caught everyone's attention. Standing, she held a serious face on. That is enough. We have absolutely no idea what exactly is going on downstairs. We should find out the cause and then we can deal with it properly like the Yui students we are. Momo resisted the overwhelming urge to laugh as she saw the hopeful eyes in front of her. This was the next generation of heroes and they were being manipulated just as easily as the Yui staff. Just proves my superior. Momo cut off as a voice chimed in. Mrs. Yaoyorozu is correct. However, as your principal, I will overrule you here. The entire class turned to meet his gaze, as relief swam over them except for one black-haired individual. Momo felt her heart begin to race. Nezu nodded his head to his students as he stepped into the already crowded room. What is happening at the current moment is a law enforcement and Yui joint operation. It was deemed as the League Eradication Trap. A little up there in terms of the name of you ask myself. However, I will happily fill you all in, since you all look so confused. 4 windows, 2 doors, 3rd story. Kurogiri isn't an option. Do they know about me? Of course not. Izuku is still under the effects his coma. But then how? How do they know? Momo gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself as a wave of nausea slammed into her. She scanned the room for options. Well, it has been a very busy and tiring time lately. It seemed that they always could read our steps and predict what we would do. Now there isn't a quirk like that as far as we know. The simplest answer we could come up with was there was a traitor amongst us. Momo stopped listening as blood thundered in her ears. She felt like screaming. She felt like destroying everything in her sight. Her chest felt as if it were going to crush her lungs. Bakugo inched closer to Deku, ready for anything to happen. He stared at the principal with barely hidden rage. If you know about this traitor, then what the fuck happened to Deku? He shouted over the rat. Nezu, not bothered by the interruption in the slightest, held a hand up. Yes, Mr. Midoriya. And the accident? Well, you see, the thing about that as well. I don't think I'll be able to explain it properly. So we will get to that topic when it becomes important. Back to the matter at hand. We had figured out that none of the staff was the traitor, so we looked at the incidents again. We found the one alarming link between each case. The target was always 1A, so obviously the traitor had to originate from 1A. Enough. Mei cried out in pain as Momo held the knife even closer to Mei's throat. Most of the occupants stared in shock as they stared at the situation in front of them. So you were playing along all this time? You ever risked a student's life just to make a fool of me? Momo shrieked as glared daggers at the others in the room. Bakugo felt his heart stop as he watched another friend in danger. I get it. You just wanted to make a fool of me, leave a stain in my reputation. Well, fuck you. How will it look when another student is harmed because of another masterful plan by you? Bakugo inched forward, ready to rush forward. Let her go, bitch. His voice came out as a growl. I won't let you hurt another one of my friends. Momo dug the knife a bit deeper, drawing blood. Right, because you were so successful at protecting Midoriya. Now I want everyone to step and touch the wall. If I so much as see any of you move, then she dies. Do it, she screamed the class into action. A sadistic smile overcame her features. Todoroki, freeze everyone to the wall, including yourself. The quiet boy hesitated before letting a grunt as he followed her order. After a minute, everyone had been frozen to the wall. With a still struggling Mei, she moved over to Nezu. Thought you were so smart with your plan. I'll be out of here before the other heroes show up. In the end, you failed again. Shigaraki dodged as another bullet flew past him. He kept moving forward, Kurogiri close behind as they slithered by most resistance. The plan had devolved to pure chaos as the pro-heroes met them from the beginning. I'm going to kill that useless bitch, he thought as he ducked underneath a cement pillar. He decayed it and rushed by. We only need the VIP. He called back. Kurogiri didn't respond, instead intercepting another flurry of bullets. Shigaraki roared with rage as he jumped on top of wooden cage and dropped a heel kick on Kamui Woods. Before the hero could fall, he grabbed a hold of his face but growled when his quirk didn't activate. Eraserhead. He dropped the hero and continued forward to the underground hero. Aizawa dashed, sending his cloth out to try and grapple the villain. Shigaraki jumped to the left and grabbed one of the wraps, yanking it to the ground. Aizawa flipped to regain his balance. He lashed out with a kick only for it to be blocked. Shigaraki threw his foot wide and lashed out with a savage kick of his own. Aizawa smirked as he twisted midair. The wraps raced back and caught Shigaraki, propelling his face into Aizawa's knee. He didn't stop as he yanked the wraps down and twisted about, slamming Shigaraki into the floor. Aizawa tried to capitalize but was caught by Kurogiri. A quick strike to stomach bought the pair enough time to escape up the stairs. Shigaraki is headed your way, All Might. Aizawa groaned into the earpiece before jumping back into the thick of the battle. Shigaraki stumbled up the stairs with Kurogiri. The plan had fallen to pieces, but he couldn't disappoint Sensei. Going somewhere, stopped as he looked over to the symbol of peace. Rage surged through him, imbuing him with fresh energy. Kurogiri, prepare plan B. He rolled up his sleeves. Izuku Midoriya be damned. He was going to kill All Might here and now. Kurogiri warped behind All Might while Shigaraki charged ahead. In a blink, All Might was out of sight. Blood rushed to Shigaraki's mouth as All Might delivered a strike to his midsection. Before he could even reach out for All Might, another strike sent him flying into a wall. The world began to fade out as it became a struggle to keep his eyes open. All Might dashed forward, shouting one of his world-famous smashes. Not yet, not yet. Now, as if he had been reading his mind, a pair of misty warp gates opened in front of All Might. The full-powered blow struck out as All Might slammed a fist into his own stomach. Shigaraki reached his hand out. This was it. This was the moment he had been living his whole life for. One more centimeter and All Might would die. Explosion setting overdrive. A raging inferno erupted from the ground below them. Yaoyorozu, is this what you really are? Todoroki shouted with anger. Momo didn't look his way. Answer me. Momo looked over at him with annoyance. Of course it is. This whole Miss Goody Good Girl was all an act. Everything in that school was a lie. Now shut up and stay out. Oh. Momo lost grip of Mei as the floor shook. Cracks began to form in the linoleum until a pair crashed through, followed by an explosion. All Might stood holding out his hand for the obscured figure in the dust. Momo fell back as an explosion of stars rocked her vision, followed by pulsing pain. The next blow sent her scrambling back, throwing out wild kick. The blow found a target as it planted itself into Mei's knee, knocking her down. Momo shook her head and looked up just as All Might jumped back into the hole. Mrs. Yaoyorozu, I don't ever remember it being my plan, or letting a student injure himself. In fact, this wasn't my plan, but it was my plan. Bakugo stared in shock, unable to wipe at the tears dripping from his eyes. As Deku stepped from the smoke in an even more advanced version of his festival suit, Momo stared in disbelief at the boy in front of her. No, she roared as she created a weapon and charged forward. Izuku shook his head and dashed forward in a speed that was barely able to be seen. He unleashed a savage punch to her stomach, making her double over. The reason this is happening is because you let your own ego cloud over everything. He hissed in her ear. An explosion from his gauntlet sent her flying back. Izuku rushed forward again, grabbed her. She weakly struggled, but the enhanced strength of suit was unflinching. Honestly, if you weren't so careless, then you wouldn't have made such a dumbass of yourself. As she opened her mouth to reply, Izuku knocked her out. Taking out a pair of cuffs, he restrained her before rushing over to the hole. All clear, the traitor has been apprehended. He radioed in. Not much left of the minions on the first floor. Ectoplasm called in. No sign of Shigaraki and Kurogiri, they're gone. All Might reported in. Izuku rolled his eyes as he took off his helmet and walked over to the frozen students. Guess I have a lot of exply, Izuku. Mei cut him off as she hobbled over and threw her arms around him, tears flowing freely. Hey Mei, he whispered back, patting her gently. Now Mei, if you don't let the medics take a look at your knee, then I'm going to destroy your next baby, Izuku whispered into Mei's ear as she tried to lash out at the medics swarming her. Instantly she stiffened as she realized just how close her and Izuku actually were. An unknown feeling washed over as her cheeks burned as bright as her hair. Izuku seemed to be completely unaware of the lack of space between them as he looked her in the eye. A stern but worried look swirled in his eyes. Fine, was as she could manage to mumble in response. Izuku patted her back and gave the medics the thumbs up as they went to work. Good, as soon as they give the all clear, then we can go meet up with everyone. Mei smiled as her partner leaned against the wall of the destroyed hospital room they were in. She didn't expect him to leave her. In fact, there was no way Izuku was getting away from her for a long time. After all, he owed her babies since he had obviously been working on his own while. while he pretended to be hurt. Mei still wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but as long as she had Izuku back, she was happy with that. After what seemed like years, the medics stepped back, allowing Mei to inspect the cast wrapped around her knee. Mrs. Hatsum, no serious damage was done to your knee. However, we recommend that you stay off your leg as much as possible. When all this mess is sorted out, we will provide you with a pair of crutches. The female medic smiled as Mei before getting a call on her radio and rushing out along with the other medics. Mei's face scrunched up in disgust at the thought of being stuck with such an annoying form of travel. She let out a yelp as she was picked up from the bed. Izuku hooked his arms underneath Mei and began to walk, unknowingly sending Mei's mind into overload. Thoughts raced around her head, crashing around and leaving no time to be able to regain any control. Did Izuku always smell like lime? Was he always this strong? When did his biceps get like that? Why is he acting so normal? Wait, why am I going crazy over this? Inwardly, she was going crazy. Her mind was a mess. Outward, Mei kept her face blank as she stared up at her partner. She had never seen Izuku like this before. She never really took in Izuku as a person. He was always just Izuku. Izuku glanced down and frowned. Is there dirt still in my hair? He blew at his bangs in annoyance. Mei felt herself smile. No, was just, it's good to have you back. Mei mumbled as they continued down the stairs in a comforting silence. Izuku and Mei didn't register the stares that they were gathering from the Wanna girls as they began whispering about the two. Izuku gently placed Mei in a seat as an ashen blonde rushed up and stared at the boy in front of him, disbelief still warring within him. Tears slid down Bakugo's cheeks as he stared at his best friend. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but he was unable to find any words. Finally, Bakugo pulled him into a tight embrace as his tears turned into full-on sobs as he buried his head into Izuku's chest. I'm sorry. I thought I hurt you again," Bakugo cried out as he shouted to his friend. Izuku hugged him back, a smile on his face. Shush, you did nothing wrong. You can't always be there to protect me, Kaken. Izuku soothed his best friend. Everyone else in the room looked away in respect for their classmates. No one judged Bakugo as he finally let his weakness show. After some time, Bakugo pulled away, wiping the tears from his eyes. The pair nodded at each other as they separated. Bakugo sat back down with the rest of the students while Izuku opened the lobby doors, signaling the UE staff to come in. The pro heroes flooded in until finally Nezu entered last and jumped up on a desk in front of his student. I do believe it's time we gave you all an explanation. As you already know, Yaoyorozu was found out as a traitor. She was under the employ of the League of Villains for how long that we can't be sure of until we question her. The heads of the League have escaped, however this should come as a severe blow to their own operations. That being said, I understand that you all have questions about a plethora of things. I can imagine first and foremost being Mr. Midoriya here. Well, the thing is that Midoriya has been working with us since the sports festival. He was never actually harmed. It was a very convincing fireworks show. In fact, it is all thanks to Izuku that we were able to enact this entire plan. Nezu waved Izuku forward. Without his actions and plans, we would have been led down the wrong path. I do believe, though, that you should do the honors of giving the details. The students shifted their eyes to the green-haired boy in front of them. Midoriya cleared his throat before stepping up. Well, it happened during my match with Shinso. My phone was sent me an alert that I set up whenever there was an abnormal readings from any of my equipment. After my match, I saw that my helmet was reading an overflow of power. I went to check it and found that someone had put in their own modification to it. That led to me reviewing the recording from the helmet itself, and what I found was that Yaoyorozu had the one been to tamper with my equipment. Further testing revealed the nature of the device. It was meant to kill me. She even left a note telling me who would have done it. Naturally, I went to Aizawa and Majima with the findings. Both teachers stepped forward. Mei attempted to jump her sensei, but Bakugo had already moved to hold her down. Both men nodded their thanks to the blonde before speaking. At first we went to get my student, however Izuku stopped us and brought it to our attention that doing so would only cause an uproar and throw away our only advantage. Surprise! Aizawa looked to his colleague to continue. So we went to the principal and the rest of the staff with our findings during the recess. To no one's surprise, the general idea was that we wanted to minimize any chance of harm or sabotage from the spy as quickly as possible. That's when Izuku came forward with the idea to let her plan succeed. At least let her believe that she had. The plan was to make her think that she had harmed him and gotten away with it. We weren't completely sold on the idea, but Nezu backed him and the plan was set into motion. Power Loader stepped back and waited for his pupil. It wasn't very hard to make a convincing explosion while it being mostly harmless. I have Mei to thank for that lesson in the workshop. Mei let out a shout of pride that was quickly silenced by Bakugo clamping his hand over her mouth. Anyway, once we had faked my injury, they rushed a body double to the hospital while I was put into hiding, or more accurately, Aizawa's house. Izuku chuckled while throwing his hands up in feigned surrender at the death stare the teacher sent his way. Bakugo and Mei couldn't hide the shock on their faces as they watched the ease Izuku interacted with. He's acting like he does when it's just us, Mei whispered to Bakugo. Bakugo nodded in response, a sense of pride washing over him. After that, it was a matter of tracking and spying on Yaoyorozu, which didn't prove to be hard with her being so high on her own success and ego. She became sloppy and arrogant. With the help of my new and improved Cyclops MK2, the air shimmered beside Izuku and a sleek black drone appeared out of thin air. We were able to come up with an easy method of spying on her. All of this led to this night, where we sprang a trap to try and bring down the League. It all went well except someone couldn't hold up their side of the plans. Izuku sent a look out of the room, but no one questioned him as he stepped back. Toshinori cringed as Midoriya glared at the spot he was hiding in the shadows. Unable to do anything other than wait and hide, the number one hero hung his head in shame. Nezu let out a low sigh as he witnessed the exchange. He pushed the thoughts to the back of his mind. Now wasn't the time for this. Well, that is the main bulk of what happened. If any of you need further details, feel free to seek them after this ordeal. I do believe we are still out well after your bedtimes. I have already taken the liberty of having your parents contacted. They should be arriving shortly. However, before that, I would like to see Ms. Hatsume and Mr. Bakugo. Please follow me. The students exchanged looks as Izuku stepped forward and hoisted Mei up and followed Bakugo and Nezu out of the room, closely followed by their respective teachers. Bakugo took in a deep breath as the brisk night air flooded his lungs. They moved behind a convoy of police vehicles to cover themselves from the media frenzy happening just beyond the barrier. Mei silently exhaled in relief when Izuku gently sat on the hood of one of the cruisers. Firstly, we want to apologize for letting you two believe that we had failed you. Yaoyorozu wasn't the only one we were tailing. We kept close tabs on the both of you as well. Knowing your relationships towards Izuku, we thought it would be best if we ensured that you did anything reckless. Izuku himself figured that if anyone was going to act on impulse, that it would have been the two of you. Bakugo and Mei sat in silence as they let the news sink in. Power Loader stepped forward, placing a hand on both students. I was so glad that you decided to come to me with the information. It showed us that you two weren't acting as recklessly as we had anticipated. Believe me when I tell you that it was a little more than relieving. It also showed us that we needed to take better care of the workshop locks. He sent a glare at his pink-haired headache. We never accounted for you to be able to get your hands on Midoriya's helmet. It was even worse when you almost blew yourself up. We almost intervened right then and there. It was Bakugo's turn to glare at Mei, who shrugged innocently at him. You're so getting a lecture when we all get home, he muttered before letting his anger fall. Aizawa cleared his throat. However, Bakugo, you do need to work on your sneaking and the art of disguises. Yaoyorozu made you instantly. That was why you never could get any info or dirt on her. She knew that you had been tailing her. Bakugo felt his cheeks heat up as his teacher chastised him. He hung his head in shame. His body went rigid as he felt a hand patting his head. But still, good job. You did what was right. Bakugo felt goosebumps as he took in the compliment. Izuku. A shrill cry rose up from the other side of the barricade, as a green-haired woman forced her way past everyone and rushed in, followed by an ashen blonde and a pink-haired woman. Izuku's legs wobbled as he saw his mother. The trio let out a shout, giving away their position. The mothers immediately made a beeline for their children. Izuku didn't bother to hide his tears as he hugged his mother. The two of them crushed each other in an embrace as if they would never see each other again. The others were in similar situations. The staff stepped back and smiled. You're okay, my baby, I thought that day. Inko couldn't finish as she devolved into sobs of happiness. Izuku cried into his mother's shoulder, not caring about anything other than her in the moment. I'm sorry, I wish I could have told you, but we needed a tight circle. I'm sorry, Mom. Inko took her son's face in hers and kissed his forehead. Don't apologize. You're okay and that's all that matters to me. The Midoriyas hugged again. Bakugo hugged his mother tightly as she rubbed his back. Tears streamed down his eyes as the full weight of the night crashed in on him, like an all-encompassing tidal wave. Not knowing how to deal with it, he just settled for silently crying in the comfort of his mother's embrace. Mei stared up at her mother with a bright smile. Her mother just smiled back, her legs unsteady as she used the cruiser for support. Why not settle for an accountant instead of this? It's much less dangerous. Her joke sounded hollow as it came out shakily. Mei threw her arms around her mother's neck and snuggled up next to her. Never, making babies is one of my loves, she whispered into her mother's ear. Ikika laughed at her daughter's words, but also smirked. I can guess the other one. Well, I am glad that my daughter knows how to pick a good one. Ikika snorted as Mei began trying to cover her mouth. Mom, she growled under her breath as she wrestled her mother. She was unable to keep it up as her mother slipped through and rushed away, leaving her daughter stranded. Izuku finally separated from his mother after his eyes felt like they didn't have anything left to give. A familiar yet different head of pink popped into his view, as a pair of scope eyes stared him down. So you're Izuku. I have heard a ton about you, Ikika Hatsume. Mei's mother gave a warm smile as she held her hand out. He took it, noticing the death stares that Mei was sending their way. Thank you for always being there for my daughter. Just don't go making any biological babies with her just yet. She added the last part in a whisper as she pulled him in close for a hug. She walked away before Izuku could fully understand what she had just said to him. Once it finally registered, Izuku's face began to turn bright red. He pushed his hair over his face, masking his embarrassment as he shuffled behind his mother, who had joined in on the laughter, the tears from moments before fading away. Aizawa grabbed Izuku and pulled him aside from the group. Unnoticed by the group as Mei tried to throw a wrench at her mother while Bakugo tried to get in the way and wrestle the weapon out of her hands. Aizawa stepped next to Nezu and looked at the young boy in front of him. "You did amazing today. None of this wouldn't have been possible without you. Who knows what would have happened if we had fallen for Yaoyorozu's trap. That being said, the matter of the offer still stands. We haven't received your answer yet. We have the papers all drafted up. All that's left is for you to sign them," he said, his voice flat as ever. Izuku nodded. He made no move to say anything, his mind swimming with everything. "Mr. Midoriya, it is quite all right for you to hold off on making a decision just yet. Classes will resume Thursday, and then we can have our tea then and discuss it then. Till then, give it serious thought. This is your future we are discussing after all. However, tonight is not for that. Go be with your friends and family. Till then." Nezu smiled at his student, who nodded in response. A grateful smile plastered on his face as he ran back to his mother. Nezu let a content overcome him before the exhaustion hit. "You know something, Aizawa? Tonight is probably the most he has smiled in a year or so." Aizawa nodded in agreement as they turned to go and deal with the mountain of paperwork that was forming from this event. "A joke, that's what they take me as. Oh, look at how stupid she was, believing that she had won. Haha, I'll show them, just they wait." Momo growled to herself as she was guided through the hospital buildings, Cementos and Ectoplasm flanking her while the squad of police officers walked her out of the ruined halls, the signs of battle scaring the walls and floors. Momo so desperately wanted to break free of her detail and find wherever Midoriya and tear him apart. Her rage pumped through her veins like sludge. It kept her warm even as she knew that she had no chance of doing the act, the Quirkless bastard. Though she would have to bide her time and wait. She took a deep breath, finally forcing herself to calm down. She had done this to herself. She let her own arrogance cloud her judgment. Midoriya hadn't beaten her. No, she had beaten herself. He was just getting the credit for it. Momo stared out the main doors of the entrance, her detail discussing something just out of earshot. The flashes of the frenzied meteor reminded her of why she chose this path, to spite her parents, to shatter their world and not live in their shadow but to have them live in hers. She clenched her jaw. This wasn't her idea of having it happen, but at least she would get something good out of the night. The officers returned and began escorting her out into the sea of waiting sharks hungry for their next big break. Momo let her wall of apathy drop as they stepped out. The response was lightning quick as the mob began shouting at the sight before them. One of the highest profile family's daughter in cuffs being taken to the vans where the rest of the villains had been put in. Momo began laughing hysterically as she bathed in the attention. She soaked in every bit greedily. Breaking news. Momo Yaoyorozu is being escorted into the truck that the other villains were just put into. What could this mean? Are there dark things in the Yayo? The reporter's shouts faded away as they passed them and was replaced by other similar statements. Momo looked over into the lens of a camera and let an evil smile seep over her elegant features. "This was all for you, Mom and Dad," she screamed as she was forced in the back of the vehicle. Momo just smiled as she rode the high. There was no way the world wouldn't wake up and talk all about her tomorrow. "When I get out, I will tear your world from you, Midoriya." Shigaraki sat up from the bed he had been placed, the IV drip in his arm confining him to the room. He absent-mindedly scratched at his bandages covering his burns. The drugs in his system kept him docile. Not that he was in a condition to go on a rampage, no matter how badly he wanted to. In the end, the plan had failed and his worthless spy got herself captured. "We are moving all of our bases and assets tonight. Tonight wasn't a total failure, my young pupil. I got even more information about my target, and the weak link that was Momo Yaoyorozu has been cut. Now is the time to grow strong while the heroes are satisfied with themselves. We will find the right time to strike, and this time we won't let anything go unaccounted in our plans." Shigaraki merely shrugged. It didn't change the fact that he had failed to kill All Might again. All for One placed a firm hand on him. "I know, he still walks and isn't dead, but think about it. Next time we will be sure to crush the pillar that holds up society when we target him. I assure you that." The Midoriya household was lively, as the living room was packed. The Bakugo, Midoriya, and Hatsune families laughed and talked excitedly while their children all sat holed up in Izuku's room. Izuku, finally free of his doppelganger suit, now dressed in a black tee with a skull on the front and shorts on, he stared at his friends in a mixture of annoyance and happiness. May had opted to take one of his hoodies and made herself comfortable at his desk, flipping through his notebooks on different designs. Bakugo sat across from Izuku, leafing through one of his best friend's quirk analysis notebooks. "You finally get me back and decide to take over my room as if you own it," he joked. Bakugo looked down from the comic and smirked at him. "Says the dumbass that's wearing my clothes." May let out a snort as Izuku looked down in shock and realization. Dude, while you were off playing Super Spy, me and May claimed this room as our own. She let a hum of agreement. His eyes widened, sending them over the edge into full-blown laughter. They didn't tell me that. He cried in protest as they continued laughing at him. You can't be serious, right? Right. May pointed to the far corner of his room where he noticed an unknown pile of clothes on the floor. Is that your dirty laundry? May cackled at him while Bakugo wiped the tears from his eyes and held his side as the pain from laughing increased. In time, Izuku couldn't help but join in and laid back in his bed. After a while, the trio quieted down and settled into their comfortable silence. Izuku's mind began to recall the meeting at Yui. Power Loader, Aizawa, and Nezu had taken him into a room and offered something that for the longest it was all he ever wanted. Even before Gyro had called him a hero and awoken his want for it again, he had secretly wanted it still. To be a hero, to get into the Yui hero course, all he had to do was sign his name and he was transferred. So why did he want to say no? His eyes drifted May as she sat hunched over his notebook, pen in her mouth. The fluorescent lights shone brightly in the interrogation room. Momo opened her eyes when the door behind her opened. She didn't bother check who had come to talk to her this time. A serious-looking man took the sat across from her, placing some folders in front of them and sliding over a mug of coffee. As the steam drifted from it, she looked at the man, who nodded in return. Gingerly, she picked the cup up and sipped at it. She resisted the urge to gag as the bitter taste of black coffee invaded her taste bud. Mrs. Yaorazu, my name is Detective Naomasa. I came to talk. Would that be okay? He didn't look up from the papers he was shuffling in front of him. Momo knew better than to answer. She had no choice in the matter. All right, I'll take your silence as a yes. It says here that you entered Yui by recommendation, a top-scoring student and a very promising outlook for a career in any form of heroism you choose to follow. That being said, why is it that you threw it all away? He pinned her with a hard gaze. Momo simply stared back. He didn't scare her. None of this did. I have my reasons for what I've done and I don't need to share them with anyone. Naomasa nodded and looked down at a notepad in front of him. Well, we can link you with a multiple of incidents at Yui, such as the attack on your class, now known as the USJ attack. Were you responsible for that? Did you help the league with it? Momo rolled her eyes. They would keep at this until they wore her down. It wouldn't yield any results, but they didn't have any other options. Stop wasting your breath. If you want information on the league from me, then I'll just save you some time. Give me a pen and that notepad and I'll write down the known addresses where I was with them. I won't give any more than that. She grabbed the mug of coffee and sipped at it more. Naomasa stared at her for some time before sliding the pen and pad over. Momo downed the coffee, ignoring the scathing heat, and picked the pen up. She wrote the promised information down, already knowing that it was useless. The league was long gone from these places. All assets had been scrubbed and the members scattered to the wind. There, now can you stick me in a cell or something? I would like to get some sleep. Naomasa read the list, giving a signal with his hand. 4 armed guards stepped, cuffs at the ready. Place her in one of the holding cells. I want it watched at all times. This will be enough for now. The night is still young. If we move fast enough, we can take the league by surprise. Mrs. Yaorazu has a long day ahead of her. Her parents have already called 1,000 times demanding her release. I'm sure you'll get a visit from them first thing in the morning. But that's what you want, isn't it? Naomasa moved in close and slapped the cuffs on, whispering the last part so only they could hear. Momo looked at him with joy as a smile spread on her face. Of course, I can't wait to see my wonderful parents. Naomasa ignored her as the guards began to move her. Momo kept her face neutral as they moved through the halls, her mind somewhere else. She knew that she was caught and her family's money could do nothing. She was shocked to hear parents still wanted to help her, though they wanted to save their image is all. But that was over by in a few hours' time. All of Japan would know of her deeds and her parents will be ruined. Then she would bide her time. After all, she was the smartest person in this building. The simple-minded plans wouldn't hold her. She will have an opening, and when she did get it, she would break free. Then there would be nothing stopping her from destroying Izuku Midoriya. Her mind began to swirl with rage at the thought of the Quirkless student. The so-called genius had made a fool of her. He thought he was better than her. She would show him and the rest of the so-called heroes in training. She would have her revenge on them all. But this time she wouldn't fall into her faults. No, she now saw the error of her ways, and she would not make the same mistake. No, she would show Izuku who truly was the better. Izuku let out a small yawn as he waited behind the curtain, Power Loader to his right, who was also dressed up in full suit, his hair combed to the side. Izuku grabbed at his own tie and adjusted it. Long night, huh? His teacher asked as Izuku forced down another yawn. He nodded in response. Let me guess. May they both said the pink-haired hurricane's name and let out a small chuckle. Yeah, she wanted to get caught up on making babies. Said I'd been holding out on her by coming up with so many and not telling her about them. Power Loader smiled as Izuku began recounting the list of inventions she had wanted to create in that night alone. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and nodded. Yeah, she is more than happy that you're back. I heard she had taken your room for her own. Izuku cringed at the memory of picking up dirty laundry from both his friends in the early light of the morning. Power Loader chuckled but dropped his smile as a TV screen showed yet another picture of a crazed Yaoyorozu being forced into the back of the police van. This angle gave them a clear look at her face. The dark voids that were her eyes held nothing but insanity the longer you looked into them. I truly hope she gets the help she needs. You would think I hate her for trying to kill me, but I can't. If anything, I find her to be sad. Power Loader gave him a look of surprise, his eyes holding a question. I mean, I know what it feels like to be alone. It does things to you, drives you to do things that you would never have done if you were in your right mind. Thankfully, I had Deku and May there for me. If not for them, who knows how I would have turned out. If I would even be here. Just as Power Loader opened his mouth to say something, Aizawa walked backstage and looked at them both. It's showtime. Hope you two are ready. The press are hungry for answers. Izuku nodded and stepped forward, Power Loader close behind. They stepped out on the stage as a sea of people shouted questions at them and camera flashes went off constantly. Izuku took a seat to the left of Nezu as Power Loader took one to the right. Izuku kept his face blank as he stared out over the sea of reporters. All right, I do want to keep this short for my student. It is his day off of school and he should be resting. So as most of you might remember this familiar face. This young man right here is Izuku Midoriya. He was the top contestant in the UUE Sports Festival. He was also the one to be blown up on live television. What the school kept hidden was that this student was working alongside the staff members to lure out a spy. The explosion and rushing to the hospital was all part of the plan. A plan which Mr. Midoriya and the UUE staff set into motion. As most of you have seen or have reported on, one Momo Yaoyorozu was taken into police custody alongside the other villains from last night's attack on the hospital. She was found to be one leaking information to a group that calls themselves the League of Villains. The room had turned from the calm before the storm to a maelstrom of sound. All the guests in attendance had begun to try and speak over one another, shouting questions, others accusations. Nezu stared, no hint of annoyance on his face, the patience of one that has done this countless times. Aizawa, on the other hand, looked ready to strangle someone as the noise began to reach a fever pitch. Izuku tapped on Nezu's shoulder. They exchanged a glance and Nezu nodded. You got this. He gave the boy a thumbs up alongside the encouraging words. Izuku cleared his throat and stood. The room soon began to calm down as the reporters all looked towards him, cameras flashing and thousands of eyes stared straight back at him. Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. A lot of news has been following my school. Almost all of it negative since this new year started. It was unheard to have things like this happen. An attack on the students during a school trip, a breach of security by a mob of press, even news about myself. I was in an explosion on national television and in front of hundreds of pro-heroes. It painted UUE in a bad light. Many people had doubts and others outright admonishing the school for its carelessness. What I did certainly did help UUE's look, but I and the staff didn't care about the look of the school. What we were thinking in that moment was how we finally had a chance to bring those that put the students in harm's way to justice. I was at the USJ attack. None of you were there. I was by two students' side fighting for our lives. One of those students was Yaoyorozu herself. She gave the villains the information they needed to ambush us there. She was working alongside them while we feared for our lives. On the other side of the enclosure, Aizawa-sensei was, as far as he knew, dying for us. He did not hesitate to rush into impossible odds with no clue if backup was coming. He was prepared to die for his class. I have heard and seen sentiments online that UUE doesn't care. UUE is risking the lives of children for funding. UUE is a disgrace. I stand here today a proud student of UUE. There is no establishment willing to go as far as they do. They put the students before everything else. I couldn't be happier to be in their support course. The school has taught me a lot and shown me that power isn't what makes us. It's our choices. I have been given the best chance I could have ever gotten. I don't have a quirk of my own, but because of this school I am able to be a hero in my own way. Izuku turned to his teachers and bowed, yelling a thank you. As he did, the room burst into a cacophony of voices. Izuku looked at Nezu, who nodded and gave him a warm smile. Izuku walked off stage, disappearing behind the curtain. Once he was out of sight, he let his nerves show as he began shaking. Taking unsteady steps, he made his way to the bathroom and began to heave up breakfast. Well, great, now I've done it. I didn't stick to the topic at all. I probably made things worse. Izuku felt a second surge of puke coming as negative thoughts swirled around his head. He just wanted to go home and invent. At least I spoke my mind. With the single good thought, he splashed cold water on his face and forced his nerves down. The day was far from over. His hand slid down to his jacket pocket, where the transfer papers seemed to burn. He did speak his mind, but a part of him still wondered if he would be even happier if he moved to the hero course. He sighed as images of him and May working together in the workshop popped into his head. Izuku pushed the thoughts away. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Hey Bakugo, you busy? I decided this news thing was a drag. Wanna hang? His laugh sounded weak even to himself. Thankfully, his friend made no comment on it and agreed to meet him at an arcade. Sweet, I'll see you there. Bakugo stood behind Izuku as his friend danced away at a rhythm game. Bakugo smirked as he watched his friend. Had you asked Izuku what his talents were, he'd only tell you about his inventing. Had you asked Bakugo, he would have told you about all of the hidden talents his friend had, dancing being among one of them. Bakugo watched as his friend smashed his old high score and continued to climb further as the song kept going at a breakneck pace. Bakugo frowned. Friend? He didn't have the right to call Izuku a friend. He was the last person Izuku should have chosen to spend his time with, yet here he was. Bakugo clenched his eyes shut as the memories flooded back to him again. The school hallway, abusing the one person who never got mad at him, who apologized to him for something he had no control of. Then the roof. Then, Bakugo flinched as pain stung his forehead. His eyes focused in on Izuku standing before him, a lopsided grin on his face. Did you just poke me with a fucking pen, Izuku? He growled as he rubbed at his forehead. Izuku's grin only widened as he put the pen back into his pocket. I did, as a matter of fact, since you were off in your own head, actually turning into a full-fledged blonde. The mocking tone he took mimicked his own from before they had become friends. Bakugo chuckled weakly and half-heartedly punched the quirkless boy's shoulder. Izuku noticed but chose not to comment on it. Bakugo was thankful for it. How about we get some lunch? Izuku offered. Bakugo smiled and nodded. Who was he to turn down food? The pair exited the arcade and walked in silence, wandering aimlessly in search of something to fill their stomach. Bakugo noted the looks they were getting. No doubt having seen Izuku's outburst online. His friend simply ignored them as he walked past. Bakugo noticed most of the attention was positive, yet his friend still turned a blind eye to everyone else. I have no right to be your friend. Maybe now that you're coming out of your shell you'll ditch me or tell me off. Bakugo hid his frown as he felt a lump form in his throat. Izuku tried to ignore the papers in his pocket. He tried to take his mind off the offer, off of Mei. He was trying and failing. Why did he want to say no? It wasn't like he'd never see her again. They would still go to the same school. They would still be friends. An odd feeling welled up inside his chest as the word friend popped up. Was it his attraction to her? Did he like Mei? Did Mei even see him as a guy? Did Mei even see gender? Both boys continued on, passing by countless options to eat at, neither boy being able to break from the prison of their minds. Finally Izuku stopped. As he looked up, did his body take him here without him even thinking? Bakugo stared in confusion as a mixture of emotions warred on Izuku's face. Deku, you okay? Hello Earth to Izuku, what's going on? Hey, Bakugo shouted as Izuku dashed past him and into empty-looking building in front of them. Fear struck him as he traced where his friend had been staring. Deku, what are you doing? He screamed, fear laced all throughout his voice. Bakugo screamed in frustration as memories of the roof, of the jump and fall. He pushed his legs as hard as he could as he chased Izuku to the roof. Mei sat in her room unusually quiet as she stared into the wall. Ikika stepped fully into the room, already used to the smell of oil, and made her way over to her daughter. Mei, seemingly broken from a spell, jumped in surprise as her mother took a seat on her bed. Mom, sorry didn't hear you come in. Or see you, I guess. Ikika chuckled as she pushed her daughter's wild mess that barely passed for hair back. Mei, why don't you tell me what's on your mind? Mei sighed and leaned into her mom. It's Izuku. Something has changed between us, well, for me at least. I can't even wrap my head around it. It's like I just realized he was, well, a he. It sounds nuts. She mumbled the last bit, blush creeping into her face. Ikika smiled as she saw a new side to her baby girl. She hugged her tightly and rested her head atop of hers. Dear, I gave birth to you. 90% of what you say is nuts. You're an inventor, so it makes sense in its own backwards way. As for Izuku, have you considered the possibility that you like him? Mei didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The heat coming off her face was enough of an answer. So you have. Then I don't see what's gotten you so weird. This is the headstrong no means yes girl I raised. Ikika cupped her daughter's face in her hands and stared into her scope-like eyes. Well, I just don't get why I started to like him all of a sudden. It's out of the blue. It doesn't make. Ew. Mei pushed away from her mother as her mother blew a raspberry and began laughing. Mei frowned, heat making her already red face even more red. What? She growled at her. Ikika held her sides and tried to calm down. It took some time before she was able to bring herself back. Mei, that is possibly the dumbest thing I've ever heard come out of your mouth. Are you really that dense in the head? Mei didn't respond, only pouted as she glared at her mom. Ikika nodded. Guess you really are that dense. Well, let me lay it out for you. Ever since the day you paired up with Izuku in class, you came home and talked more about him than the babies that you made together. You always would go on about how he never once would get impatient with you or even mad. You would gush about how he was so smart and loved making babies as much as you do. Izuku has been the #1 topic you talk about in this house. I have to tell you, for a smart girl you are dumb at emotions. I knew from then that you liked him, you just didn't realize it yourself. You fell for someone just as bright and passionate as you, someone you had things in common with. In fact, he's probably the only person to truly understand you. As for seeing him as a guy, Well, that just means you finally realized it. Mei sat quietly as she stared down at the plain gray hoodie she was wearing. It was Izuku's. Only the dork would get a hoodie that said hoodie across it. Mei thought back to all the time she had spent with Izuku, how she was happier than she ever was, to finally have someone to share her love baby making with. All the laughs and breakthroughs they had together. A deep smile spread across her face. She hugged her mom. I like Izuku, she screamed into her chest. Ikika smiled at the revelation that daughter finally came to. It was about time if you asked her. Thanks, Mom. What would I do without you? Probably end up in prison. Her mother squealed as a pillow was swung at her head. The pair burst into laughter as they wrestled each other for the weapon. Deku, Bakugo burst through the door and stood atop a square roof with railing all around it. Izuku stood leaning on the railing staring up into the after sky. The sun began to dip over the horizon, drenching everything a deep orange. Bakugo doubled over, catching his breath, the adrenaline finally leaving his body. What the fuck, Deku? You gave me a heart attack. I thought. You thought I was going to jump again, try and end it all again. Bakugo looked up, but Izuku's gaze was firmly planted on the sunset. Bakugo, I think I know what I have to do. I have been holding on to this dream of being a pro hero, but that isn't me anymore. I love making invention. I love tinkering with something till I figure it out. The me that wanted to follow in All Might's footsteps died when I jumped off the roof of the school. Even so, I still held on to the dream, unable to get the itch out of my head. Today at the press release, I spoke from my heart and didn't want to be a pro. I wanted to keep on doing what I'm doing now. Honestly, I think the thing holding me back really is myself. I haven't addressed the problems directly, the reasons I became the way I am. So that's what I'm doing now. He pushed off the railing and tossed his suit jacket to the side. Let's air out our hearts, get everything out in the open. Kaken, fight me. Katsuki. Bakugo stood in shock at the proclamation from his friend. Unsure of what to do, he stood rooted to the spot. Izuku pushed off the railings and put his arm around Bakugo's neck. He let out a hearty laugh as he slapped the taller boy's back. Kaken, you should have seen your face just then. It was priceless. Bakugo felt his body release the tension it had been holding onto without him even noticing. Izuku continued to laugh himself hoarse as he doubled over in pain from laughing. Izuku, why don't you hate me? I tormented you for most of our lives and worse, brutalized you so many times. His voice trembled as he forced himself to remember the pain he had put the kind-hearted boy through. You should hate me, even want payback for what I did. How could you forgive me so? Bakugo didn't get a chance to finish his sentence. He froze as Izuku placed his hands on his shoulders. Katsuki. Bakugo, I forgive you. I forgive you for all the beatings, for all the things you said in anger and hate. I forgive you for telling me to kill myself. I forgave you a long time ago. Izuku rested his forehead against his friend's, a warm smile on his face. It's time you forgave yourself. It's time you move forward in life. Bakugo trembled as he looked into his best friend's eyes. They held no judgment, no ounce of hate. Katsuki crumbled as he let his emotions free. His sobs came out hoarse as he let out everything. Izuku simply hugged him tighter as the other boy let all of his buried emotions flow free. They stood like that for some time, no words passing each other. Finally, the blonde pulled away, wiping at his eyes. Izuku politely turned and looked out over the city, letting his friend regain himself. Not long after, Bakugo joined him in leaning against the railing. I got an offer for the hero course, Izuku said as he shifted his weight to his other arm. Bakugo looked over at him but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. I'm going to reject it. That seems obvious now, but it wasn't till now. I struggled with making a choice for a while. You know, I still haven't thanked you. Bakugo looked over at him with a confused look on his face. For what? He croaked as he rubbed at his sore throat. Izuku stepped back from the railing and turned to his friend. Thank you for making me go to Yui. None of this would have been possible if you didn't bring it up all those months ago. Bakugo's eyes widened as he saw the dazzling smile from the boy. It wasn't one of the rare smiles that he always noticed. This was the same bright smile Izuku had worn before his world had been appended. He couldn't hold the gaze any longer and looked away as his cheeks reddened. Of course, he mumbled. Izuku chuckled as he hooked an arm around his friend's shoulders. The pair shared laughs as they made their way back home. Both different and reformed. No silent weight was crushing the ashen blonde as he stepped in tow with his friend. Izuku smiled more often, yet would drop it the moment he had a chance to snipe at his best friend. Momo sat on the plank that passed for a bed in her cell. Her parents had come and gone. They had demanded to know why. The question was a stupid one in her opinion, even when she told them that she did it because she had felt like it, because it was her decision and no one else's. She sighed as she laid down and closed her eyes. She was in no rush and had no worry. Getting out of here was set in stone. When said event came, she would be ready. Till then, her mind was focused on something else, or rather someone else. She smiled as she began thinking of different ways to prove her superiority over Midoriya. She began running scenario after scenario. She did so again and again, adding more notes to her mental list. She smiled as she did so. They would eventually see who the better was. Till then she would continue to plan. The couple days Izuku had been given off to prepare for his return to school had been rather uneventful. He spent his time divided by 3 people, Bakugo, Mei and his mother. His mother kept him at her side if he wasn't doing anything, and apparently if it didn't involve Mei or Bakugo then he was in fact doing nothing. He didn't mind it for the most part. He was happy to be able to spend the time with his mother. The only moment he had been separated from them was when he had to make a call. He had informed Aizawa that he was rejecting the offer. The teacher, unfazed, had said okay and said he would still see him soon. The rest of time had passed boringly, which he was more than happy to accept. He had enough excitement for the time being. Sadly, that wasn't in the cards for him in the way of his so-called friends. He had to remind himself that these were in fact his friends as they dragged him onto the train. "I'm building a security system to keep you 2 out of my home," he groused. Mei looked up from her sketchpad with an evil gleam in her eyes. "Go ahead and try. I'll have it dismantled in no time flat." He resisted the urge to shiver knowing that she was completely serious. Instead, he rolled his eyes much to Bakugo's amusement. "Izuku, we have so much work to catch up on. You have no idea the amount of babies I have ready to be shared with you. I have been saving them up. Like this one." She flipped the pages on her sketchpad till she found what she was looking for and held it up for him to see. The design was of a device supposedly able to dampen kinetic energy. His interest piqued. He reached out and grabbed the pad, choosing to ignore the burning sensation that rippled through his hand as he brushed against Mei's. He began writing adjustments on the schematic, already lost in his own world. Had he not been, he would have noticed the blush on his friend's face. The sly smirk on the blonde's face said that he had not missed it. He said nothing, instead choosing to raise an eyebrow at the pink-haired girl. She turned away and buried her face into one of her notebooks instead. Bakugo just chuckled as he looked between the two. "This is gonna be funny as hell, calling it now," he said as he took out his phone. Izuku looked up from his writing. "What was that?" Bakugo just shrugged in answer and began surfing the web. Izuku followed suit and returned back to his writing, a smile working its way into his features as he sat between his 2 friends on their way to school. "I wouldn't give this up for anything." He leaned into Mei as he felt her shift. He didn't bat an eye when the girl placed her head on his arm, watching him mark down more notes and improvements, occasionally throwing in her own input and pointing out mistakes in his notes. Izuku ignored the red in his cheeks. Mei ignored her own blush as well. Bakugo took a picture. There was no way Uraraka would let him live if he didn't. The support shop was buzzing with work, the students moving about working on gadgets. Izuku inspected the wiring in the newest prototype. The boy frowned as he checked off another bullet on his mental list. Mei was working on the sleeve of the gauntlet, her focus completely consumed by the task in front of her. Majima eyed them from his desk. His eyes settled on the green-haired boy. It was mysterious to him that the boy had rejected the offer to the hero course. However, it wasn't his place to ask. It was his student's choice and he would respect it. Majima's smile evaporated as he heard a small explosion on the other side of the workshop. He sighed. At least it wasn't a big one, he supposed, as he stood. Izuku looked up from his work, a sigh escaping his lips as his eyes settled on the clock in their workstation. The time had flown by, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Mei, it's time for lunch," he informed his partner as he wiped his hands clean. The girl in question did not respond as she continued working. He walked up to the pink-haired whirlwind as she wired more of the sleeve. Izuku knew better than to try and interrupt her when she was on a hot streak. With a small laugh, he wrote a small note for the girl before slipping out of the workshop. "How's it hanging, hero?" Izuku turned to see Gyro leaning on the wall opposite to him. Izuku's placid mask had slipped back on the moment he entered the school, but he let it drop, showing a small smile. "Hey, waiting for Majima-sensei. I can run in and get H." His was cut off as the girl let out a chuckle and waved her hand in dismissal. "Nah man, I was waiting for you. Bakugo was a little busy with some remedial lessons or something and asked me to come and grab you while he was busy. I think his exact words were, make sure Deku eats even if you have to knock him out and drag him to the cafeteria. Oh, and Mei too, God knows those two would be a disaster without me." Gyro smiled as she finished recounting her orders. Izuku couldn't help but snort after hearing her. "Well, guess we should get a move on. I don't want to hear him whine about me and Mei not eating lately." The pair began making their way to the cafeteria. "Just a warning, things have been a little weird in One since the Momo stuff. Some of us are taking it better than others, but still it's been rough. Plus some other things that aren't really your concern since it's mainly a class thing. Let's just say a lot of people have looked down on us since the incident went public." Izuku nodded in response. "It's okay to feel bothered by what happened. You and her were close, right? I mean, I saw you both hanging out and talking a lot, so it would make sense that you would feel hurt. It's not something you need to hide." He stopped walking and turned to the girl. "I know that means nothing coming from me." He chuckled while looking away from her. He froze, his hands wrapped around him, and Gyro squashed him tighter. "Worried about me? That's adorable. I appreciate it. Trust me, I do. But I'm okay, or well, I'm getting better. It's weird that you're such a closed-off person, yet you open up if it's to help someone else. It's kind of funny to me." As if suddenly noticing his discomfort, she pulled away and gave him some space. I see that you're not used to touching girls. You'll get there. Her smile grew wider as he glared at her. Anyway, it's about time we got lunch. He huffed and began walking. Gyro laughed as she followed along. Oh my god, you're so easy to tease. Izuku ignored it as he stomped forward. Awa, come on hero, don't leave your damsel. Izuku rolled his eyes, but he couldn't hide the smile that flashed for the briefest of seconds. Of course he would not show Gyro the current source of his annoyances. May let out a yawn as she finally leaned back from her work. Izuku, what time is it? The usual snappy response was missing. She looked to her left and saw no Izuku. She looked around the workshop and saw no one except her sensei, who was busy working at his desk. May walked over to her sensei and stood in front of his desk. May, I'm a little busy right now. Izuku went to lunch and left you a note. The man didn't look up from his paperwork but pointed with his pen to the lime green sticky note left on their workshop. May nodded. After some time, Majima sighed and placed his pen down. Yes, May. Sensei, how would you like to be asked out? Power Loader's eyes widened in shock. May, for the love of God, why are you asking me this? May tilted her head to the side as if he had just asked the dumbest question a man could have. Because I like Izuku and want to ask him out, but I have no idea how to do so. Also, I feel fear at the idea of asking him out, and I also am scared that he might like someone else. May was abruptly cut off as Majima clamped a hand over her mouth. First off, lead with that next time, understand? He waited for her to nod before he continued. Second, Izuku is a very fragile person, so something simple. Nothing over the top or anything involving explosives or acts that could lead to an explosion. Understand? The girl held up a thumb to show she understood. Only then did Majima release the girl. Now you have about 20 minutes left in lunch. Knowing Izuku, he will probably already be on his way back home. He looked down the massive amount of paperwork in front of him and he sighed. I'm not busy, so I'm going to grab a coffee. I'll be back before lunch lets out. But that the teacher stood from his desk and began walking out of the room, stopping just before the door. Oh, and May, I think it's safe to say that you don't have to be worried about him saying no. Thank you, Sensei. May shouted, but the teacher was already walking out of the room. Gotta head out already. You haven't even finished your food, man. Kirishima called to Izuku as the boy in question got ready to leave. It's not my food. That food is for May. If I don't bring her back any food, she'd kill me. The table quickly stopped trying to convince the boy to stay. They all knew just how dangerous the pinkette could be. Izuku waved one last time before turning and heading for the door. He didn't get very far. I'll want just the class I was looking for. I see that you're down 2 students. Yaoyorozu and that obnoxious prick that has more bark than bite. Oh wait, Yaoyorozu turned out to be a villain. I could have never imagined that someone from the best of the best could be a traitor. I mean, it was such a shock. No one could believe it. Certainly not I. After all, you were all supposedly better than the rest of us students. Izuku turned around to see a blonde-haired boy leaning on the spot he had just occupied. Izuku noted the shit-eating grin the kid had. He also noticed that no one at the table looked up to meet his gaze. Izuku felt his anger rising as the boy went on berating his friends. Oh, and I forgot about Bakugo, who, let's be honest, is probably the next one of you to become a villain. It wouldn't shock anyone to find out if he was already a traitor. Oh, I bet that's why he isn't here, because before Izuku could realize what he was doing, he had rushed forward, slammed into the kid. Already having tackled the kid to the ground, Izuku looked into his eyes. Who the hell are you? Izuku smiled as he raised a balled fist and began beating the kid as his response. The cafeteria descended into chaos. The cafeteria was consumed in a brawl. Izuku didn't pay it any mind as his focus was on the blonde bastard currently trying to wriggle free from his grasp. Izuku had a good chunk of hair to keep his target steady as he hammered away with his right. Izuku saw fear in the boy's eyes as Izuku relentlessly smashed his fist against the boy's face. Izuku froze as the fear faded away. Izuku had no time to react as an oversized fist slammed into him. The blow sent him tumbling back and writhing in pain. A weight settled onto his back. He didn't need to see to know that his target had mounted him. The blows came slow and heavy. Each hit sent an explosion of stars into his vision. Izuku grit his teeth as he tried to wriggle free. It proved to be a mistake as air exploded from his lungs. The edges of his vision swam as he fought to keep focus. I don't know who you think you are, but it isn't very heroic to attack someone while they are having a conversation. Momo growled as he flipped his target over. Izuku could hazily make out the chaos he had caused. The students of Wano were fighting with a class of other students. It wasn't hard to imagine his opponent was part of the class. Another fist connected with the green-haired boy's jaw, sending a new wave of pain. The taste of metal began to flood in his mouth. Izuku could already see the staff rushing in to break the brawl up. Side characters like you need to learn their place and stay in the background. Momo roared as he interlocked his hands, preparing to smash them down. Izuku saw his opportunity as the boy roared with indignant anger. Izuku spat the blood that had begun to flood his mouth. Momo cried out in surprise as his vision suddenly blurred. Izuku surged up with the strength he had left, forcing the boy off of him. Momo began swinging wildly, desperate to defend himself from any further attack. Izuku waited for the opening to present itself. Sure enough, he spotted it and rushed forward, intent on bringing an end to the fight. However, his fist was engulfed in a massive hand. Enough. The commanding voice of All Might boomed throughout the cafeteria. Izuku looked at the man he hated. All Might stared back with a saddened expression. Midnight, get Monoma to the infirmary. Ectoplasm, round up both classes and bring them to their classrooms. Netsu will be there shortly. After I take this one directly to him. The other pros nodded along and began taking over the situation. All Might began dragging Izuku along. I am disappointed in you. The words were said low enough so that only he could hear them. Izuku's blood began boiling as he glared with hatred into the back of the man's skull. Tell me, how does it fucking feel? He snarled at the man. All Might only sighed in response as he dragged the boy out of the cafeteria. The pair made their way in silence. Izuku's eyes remained glued to the floor, taking in every detail from specks of dirt to slight discoloration. He noticed it all. The spell was broken abruptly as the number one hero led them to a room. The man let go of the boy as he continued walking till he stood before the windows. Izuku said nothing. The scowl he wore deepened as minutes ticked away. Finally, All Might sighed once more, turning to face his biggest failure. Young Midoriya, I know you want nothing to do with me, but I need you to hear me out. The symbol of peace looked around the empty classroom, avoiding Izuku's gaze. I revealed how I was once quirkless like yourself. That was not a lie. My power was granted to me by my mentor. It was her who taught me everything about being a hero. She gave me everything. It is only because of the quirk that she passed down to me that I was able to become the symbol of peace. She truly believed that I could become a great hero despite being quirkless. This truly makes me a hypocrite for what I did to you. But you have proven. The imposing man stopped as Midoriya held a hand out. All Might, so help me, if you dare disrespect me by offering your quirk, I will go ballistic. He hissed through clenched teeth. All Might's face warped and his confusion warred with worry. I don't understand. How can I fix this? The pro muttered. Izuku bristled as he heard the man. I see. Allow me to tell you. All Might's gaze locked onto the boy's own emerald orbs. You can't fix this. You did what you did, and that's it, he stated calmly. All Might stood rooted to the spot as he watched the boy, who always teemed with rage whenever he entered the room, took a breath and calmed himself. There is no taking back what you said. Even if you continue to apologize, I will always refuse it. Grow up, All Might. You're hoping to fix something that's broken beyond repair. You failed me, so you can't always save everyone. I don't need your help. I found something that I want to do with my life and found people that helped me. I don't need your saving. You've had your chance for that and failed. Do yourself a favor and let it go. I hate you, and that is something you need to live with or don't. It's not like I'm the one seeking you out. You're the whole out of sight, out of mind thing. Look, in short, get over it. Because you trying to make amends is just making things worse. Izuku took a long breath after the tirade came to a close. All Might let the words sink in deep before letting out a chuckle. I suppose you are correct. I suppose we should go see the principal about your starting a fight. All Might adjusted his tie as he began to lead the way. That fucker started it. The young man following him grumbled as he shoved his hands into his pockets. All Might smiled as he pretended to not have heard him. May sat at her workshop. For once the Pinkette wasn't a whirlwind of activity as she sat slumped over workshop staring at the clock on their desk. Her frown deepened as the thought of him crossed her mind. Stupid Izuku, starting a fight and getting suspended. Not even a full day back and you're gone again. Stupid. Oh hey, Sensei didn't notice you there. She didn't move her position, only her crosshairs looking up to her teacher. Power Loader stared down at his student with a sinister smile. Lazily he leaned down and began reviewing her project. May, are you perhaps pouting over the fact that your crush has already been suspended? May simply stared at her teacher, who in turn unplugged a wire from the prototype gauntlet. He let out a chuckle. May, he's only suspended for today and tomorrow. It's not like he'll be gone long. May's eyes zoomed in on her sensei's hands as he continued to review. Sensei, what are you doing? Oh, just checking your work. He tore out a piece from the gauntlet and began wiring new connections to it. Sensei, don't do that if you wire. She didn't get to finish the sentence as Power Loader stared at her with a deadpan expression. The final wire connecting to the accelerator in his hands. May, why would you try and output this much power to the accelerator? Doing so runs the risk of an explosion. You know that you were warned that one more explosion will result in a suspension. May's eyes widened as her teacher's grin grew. With an overdramatic bow, he presented the power switch to her. You're the best, Sensei. Hatsume burst out of the front doors of Yui. Despite the soot and light burns she sported, the girl smiled brightly as she raced to the train station. I'm coming for you, Izuku. She cheered. Inko sighed as she looked up from the dishes. She was conflicted at the moment. Her son had been back for one day and already got himself suspended. But once she heard his reasoning, she didn't have the heart to scold him. She had felt pride at what her son had done. She had always thought her son would never have to bring this dilemma up. The front door closing pulled her from her thoughts. A tangle of pink hair came into view, May making her way to the coat rack, hanging her jacket and taking her shoes off. "Hello, Mrs. Midoriya." Inko smiled at the girl as she moved over to brush some soot off the girl's face. She made a fuss but ultimately gave in, letting the older woman wipe her face till she was satisfied. "I hope you don't mind me staying over. I already texted my mom." The girl held up her phone as proof. "Of course you can stay, May. Why do you think I gave you your own key? Now off you go. Izuku is in his room. I'll be starting dinner if you need me." She sent off her future daughter-in-law, or so she hoped, with a flick to the head. May beamed as she bounded up the stairs, just as the realization hit Inko. "May, why aren't you in school? I caused another explosion in the workshop and got suspended." The girl called down with a hint of pride in her voice. Inko chuckled nervously as she went about preparing dinner. "You sure know how to pick them, Izuku," she whispered happily. Izuku looked up from his schoolwork as May exploded into his room, landing a heap of blankets and pillows. Already having heard her, he had prepared a makeshift crash mat for the girl. "Oh, hi May." He looked back at his schoolwork longingly as he greeted his other half. Ultimately, he closed the notebook knowing full well he wouldn't get any work done. "Izuku, I got suspended from school." The girl jumped up from the pile and settled on his bed. Izuku ignored the stray thoughts that entered his mind and settled in next to her. "Let me guess, you blew up our gauntlet." The girl nodded excitedly at him. He rolled his eyes as he suppressed the small smile on his lips. He knew she had noticed it by the way her eyes lit up more. "Well, we can build it here. I want to get it to Kakin as soon as we can." While May, he made to stand but was abruptly pulled back down onto the bed. "What was that for?" he grumbled. His annoyance faded as he looked up at May. The usual carefree and driven girl stared down into the bed, her face for once uncertain. "May, what's wrong?" He shifted to focus his attention on her. All thoughts of inventing pushed from his head. "Izuku, I got suspended so I could talk to you. I couldn't wait till later tonight." She met his eyes for a second before darting away. They focused on anything aside from Izuku. Her chest felt tight as her heart hammered away in her chest. Her mind proved treacherous as doubts swirled around. "Izuku, I. Her throat closed as she struggled with her fear. She didn't want to run the chance of losing him, even if the chance was small. She didn't want to risk it. She couldn't risk it. "May, take a breath and look at me," he urged gently. May did so. "Good, now focus on me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you forever and always. You're my best friend after all." The girl smiled as she stared into those gentle pools of emerald. "I like you. I want more than friendship, Izuku." The words were barely above a whisper. Izuku could almost believe he imagined them. She was shaking slightly. Gingerly, Izuku reached out and intertwined their fingers. He tried to ignore the heat as their hands touched or the heat building within him. He knew that he was as bright red in the face as the girl in front of him, but he pressed on. "I like you too, May. There are a ton of things I like about you." He smiled as his mind highlighted everything he liked about his partner. "I like your drive to be the best. I like how you keep pressing on when an invention fails or how you don't care about what other people think. I like how kind you are." May broke eye contact first as she stared at the floor. "I'm not that kind," she mumbled as she pouted. Izuku laughed as she let his left hand take her other free hand in his. "That's not true. I distinctly remember around the time school had just started you showed just how kind and caring you were. I had just rushed into the workshop a mess, on the verge of tears. You noticed immediately but chose not to say anything. Instead, you covered me with a tarp. You gave me the ability to let out my emotions. Even afterward you didn't pry. You just helped me keep occupied with inventing. That was one of the kindest things someone did for me." He trailed off as they gazed at each other. Slowly Izuku leaned forward. May found herself tilting her head as she made to meet him, her eyes drifting shut. "Fucking called it. Oh my god, he's growing up." Both teens froze, their eyes snapping to the door. Inko and Bakugo stood in the doorway, the latter taking a picture on his phone. "Mom," Izuku shouted as he flung a pillow at her from nearby. May, on the other hand, gave chase after her other best friend. Izuku held his face in his hands as the house devolved into madness. The door swung open as Detective Naomasa stepped into the interrogation room once again. Momo stared at him, a blank expression on her face. She had been doing so for most of the time she spent in his presence. The man looked down at her with a defeated expression. "Yaoyorozu, do you understand that I can only help you if you want it? I am trying my best to keep you here, but the push for you to be put into Tartarus is gaining traction. The higher-ups want to make an example out of you. I don't." He looked into the girl's eyes, desperate to find any remorse or any hint of something savable. Slowly the girl pushed forward and stared up at him defiantly. "You are wasting your time. I know you don't care about me. You only want to see if there is something else I'm hiding. Do yourself a favor, detective, and give up. Go out and play at being a hero." Naomasa sighed as he hung his head in defeat. I'm sorry that I failed you most of all," he whispered before making his way out of the room. Momo shook her head. She chuckled as she thought of his words. It was ridiculous that a random stranger could feel sorry for her of all people out of this situation. It was such a blatant lie, of course, she couldn't have believed it. Like time and time before, a pair of officers walked in ready to escort her back to her cell. Momo looked between the pair. The usual gruff men that always took her to her cell were instead replaced with newcomers. She looked between the nervous-looking woman and the younger-looking man. Unable to do anything other than comply, she stood and assumed her spot between the two of them as they began walking. "So the usual guy's busy," she said casually as they weaved through the halls of the police station. Neither so much as glanced in her direction. Momo felt her panic rise as her guards forced her to take a wrong turn. Something was wrong. Not a second later, and her fears were founded as the man covered her mouth with his hand. She struggled uselessly, trying to force out a scream. The man's strength proved to be too much as he kept her pinned against him. Momo watched in horror as the woman removed a syringe and vial from her pockets. The woman let out a curse as Momo trashed about trying to kick the woman. "Give it a rest," the man growled as he slammed his captive's head against the wall. Momo fought to stay conscious as her vision swam. A sharp pinch brought her out of the haze. Her eyes focused on the syringe in her arm just as it finished injecting its contents into her. Suddenly her body felt too heavy as her head began lolling to the side. Her mind clouded over as the dark took her. "Mommy, I got the highest grade in my class." The little girl looked up at her mother with excitement. The older woman stared down at her daughter. Slowly she took the graded test from her daughter's hands. "Momo, you bear the name of Yaoyorozu. Anything less than perfection is unacceptable." The woman tore the paper in half, letting the pieces drift to the ground. "I expect a perfect score next time. Now go and study, I am very busy." Not waiting for her daughter's response, she made her way out of the oversized living room. The small girl stared blankly down on the torn paper on the floor, the 95% mocking her. A sign of her failure, the little girl realized. Hollowly she walked to her room and began studying. All she ever did was study for things. "Momo, this is a disgrace." The middle schooler flinched as her father shouted. She kept her eyes locked onto the floor, burning the patterns in the carpet into her mind. 89. You are the future of the Yaoyorozu name, yet it seems you do not care. I don't. The girl recoiled back, clutching her face. Her cheek throbbed with pain as she stared up at the man she was forced to call father. He stared back down, his eyes ablaze with rage. "You are my daughter. You owe me everything you have, yet this is how you act. You will do what I and your mother tell you to do. You do not get to make your decisions. That is something parents have control of. Now get ready, the guest will arrive in an hour. I expect you to be on your best behavior." Her father waited for her to nod before motioning for her to leave. Only after entering her room did the girl allow the tears to fall. She stared at the dress laid on her bed. Her sorrow soon turned into a raging inferno of anger and hatred. But like always, she forced it down. It was her fault. Yes, it was her fault. You know it's okay to be angry. You don't always have to take what they say. Momo turned to face her only friend, Maki. She couldn't force any more out before the tears began falling again. The maid smiled. It wasn't one full of joy, but of understanding. She moved over to the girl and began comforting her. "Stop, I don't want to see this." "Mom, where is Maki? I can't find her anywhere." The girl's mother looked back at her with a look that the young girl could not understand at the time, but enough that she was annoying her mother. "Momo, it is unbecoming to worry of the help, but if you must know, Miss O's has quit. Now get going." Momo kept the smile on her face, even as her insides crumbled to fine dust. The girl's heart tore with every beat as she processed the information. Hollowly she began trudging to her room. She stopped as she passed her father's study. The girl didn't believe it. Maki wouldn't leave her. She had promised to take her away from this place. Momo bit her lip as she began picking the door to her father's study. She may have been 12, but she was the smartest person in the room, and she could tell her mother was lying. With a quiet cheer, she entered the pitch-black room. She held out her hand and created a flashlight as she closed the door behind her. Not wanting to waste time, Momo dashed to the desk and began rummaging through it. After some time, she found a small plain folder simply marked as O's cleanup. Momo gingerly opened the folder. The last dregs of hope were ripped from her, as her heart shattered completely. Momo stood there, frozen in mute horror as she stared down at the pictures and plans in front of her. The void began to pulsate where her heart had once been. "This is what it means to be a Yaoyorozu," she whispered to herself. A dull throbbing was the first thing Momo could feel as she pried her eyes open. The burning of her arm drew her attention fast enough. She noted how her hands were bound to a meat hook. Lazily, her eyes drifted about the side of the room. She could see other people, bodies, she corrected the thought, hung on meat hooks, various forms of damage done to them. A man stepped out from the shadows. Momo took in his appearance. He smiled back at her, revealing pearly white teeth. Momo looked over his business suit and his combed hair. "Momo Yaoyorozu, it is a pleasure to meet you. I figured it would only be a matter of time before I was called in to take care of you. When I saw you all over the news, I just knew I would be seeing you." The man stepped forward and began inspecting his nails. Do you have any idea who I am or what I do? The man stared at her with a shark-like grin. You are here to kill me, she stated. Her throat burned for water, but she knew there was no point in asking the man in front of her. Right you are. I suppose I shall tell you my name. It is Atlas. He waited for her to react, only to strike her in the face when she showed none. I hate people like you, trying to play it cool till the very end. Will you want to know something? You will die screaming and begging just like everyone else. He roared into her face. After a moment he stepped back and composed himself. Well, I'm fired up already. Say what if you can survive for an hour or two, I'll tell you who hired me. Momo didn't respond as she grit her teeth. The man took off his suit jacket as he looked at her. Do try and make it to that first goal. It's never fun when they give out early. He held out his left arm to her. She withheld the scream that tried to wrestle free. A bone punctured her left shoulder. Oh yeah, about your quirk, it's been put out of commission thanks to this little beauty. He held up a red syringe. Quickly storing it, he began to continue his onslaught. It felt like a lifetime had passed as the man staggered back covered in sweat and blood. Momo dangled limply as her entire body sang out in pain. Each breath she took felt like a monumental task. Her left eye had swollen shut a while ago, as did most of her face from the beating. I got to give it to you, kid. You sure are tough. Guess I'll tell you, my employers, before I kill you. I kinda am running out of time. Momo gave no indication of her listening, but the man still continued. The people that have always hired me for everything dirty are the Yaoyarazus, and they are the ones who hired me to take care of you. Even gave me this drug they got a hold of to do something about your quirk. They want to start again, start fresh. Can't have that if you are around to keep staining the name. Well, time to take care of the trash. The man laughed as he aimed a hand at the beaten girl's head. I agree. A raspy voice called out as a hand reached out and touched Atlas's arm. Before the hitman could react, the top half of him exploded in viscera. The owner of the hand stepped out of the shadows, revealing a pale man in a beak mask. He knelt by the remains of the man and began searching his pockets. Momo lost the strength to keep her eyes open as she gave into the comforting embrace of unconsciousness, a small bloody smile on her face. Bae, aren't you in the middle of workshop time? Izuku hugged the phone to his ear as he finished tying his tie. Yeah, but I miss you. I know you and Co have to go down to the police station, but that doesn't give you permission to skip out on making babies. Izuku sighed as he heard the yelling ensue in the background. Alright, May, sounds like you're about to deal with a very angry Majima-sensei. Good luck. He took the chance while he had it. After checking how he looked in the mirror, Midoriya grabbed the documents on his desk and raced out of his room. Co waited by the door, anxiety chipping away at her smile. Honey, the escort is ready for us, she whined as the pair bolted out the door, Co slowing to lock the door before jogging to catch up. Do you have all the documents? Izuku nodded while getting into the back of the police car the department had sent. Yaoyarazu was still on the loose and unaccounted for. The school and authorities made sure that the Midoriyas were under watch. Izuku, however, felt that wasn't needed, not with the files he held in his hands. He sighed as he flipped through them again. He hoped this would be enough. It had to be. It's already been a month and still no sign of her. I can safely bet that if she had gotten out herself, she would have already made contact with him in one way or another. I was able to get all this dirt on her parents, so I'm sure that arresting them will lead us to Momo. The question of why did he care came to mind. He sat there in silence as he stared off into space, unable to fully answer that question. Izuku, are you listening? Izuku was snapped from his thoughts as his mother shouted one last time. He realized that the car had begun moving. The scenery had changed from just outside his home to a side street off the main road. He must have been in his own header longer than he thought. The car slowed to a stop as they approached a traffic light. Izuku, how do I send this video to May? She grumbled. Just wait for it to finish recording, and it will auto. Mom, watch out. May hated missing Izuku. She hated it almost as much as when he forces her to study. Right now, she hated that he hung up while Sensei had been distracting her. May was saved though as she saw a notification from Co on her phone. May opened it and pressed play. Power Loader was not having a good day. Things had been quiet for almost a month. May was behaving. He had been right in setting up Izuku and her. A little too right though, seeing as now he had basically signed the boy up for a lifetime commitment. His chuckle was cut short as the usual drone of the workshop was shattered by a blood-chilling scream. He rushed over to the source to find May rushing out of the workshop. Everyone stay here. I'll be back. None of the other students made a fuss as he dashed out the room. Mona was in the middle of a lesson as May burst through the door's Power Loader just after her. No one made a move or a sound when they took in the Pinkhead's form. The girl had a constant stream of tears and she slammed her phone down in front of Bakugo. Bakugo looked down at the phone. His blood froze as he saw the frozen image before him. He could just make out an unconscious Izuku being dragged out of a flipped car. The teachers looked at each other as they sent a student to get the principal. Naomasa picked up his phone before the first ring was done. Save it, Toshi. We found the patrol car. You got a video? I need a copy. No, we tried and tried, but Mrs. Midoriya didn't make it. We lost her in transit. Momo's eyes snapped open. Her body felt weak and rusted. How long had she been out for? A giggle caught her attention as she looked over to her side. Sitting in an ornate chair was a small girl with bright red eyes stared at her. A small horn protruded out of her forehead at an angle. The smile she wore was full of mischief. Next to her was the man that had saved Momo. The man in the beak mask coughed as he stepped forward. Welcome to the Shai Hasekai compound. I am the interim leader, Overhaul, and this is the next head of the family. Ari. All for One smiled in content as he stared at the tube in front of him. Inside was a project he had been itching to start. He just couldn't wait any longer. You will do great things for me, Yazaki. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.